Good evening. I'm Alice Norris, the mayor.
I'm James Nasita, City Commissioner.
Doug Leary, Commission Chair.
Kathy West, City Commissioner.
Rocky Smith, City Commissioner.
And please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a lot of meat on the agenda this evening, but before that, let's begin with citizen comments. I believe we have several people who signed up to speak, so when you come to the microphone, you'll see that your timer is here, so it tells you when your 3 minutes are up. You can self-monitor, and then we ask you to introduce yourself by name and the city in which you reside. So let's begin with Darren Park, followed by Brian Watt. Good evening.
My name is Darren Park. I'm representing Oregon City Baseball, Black Sox baseball program, which we do fundraising for the high school program and their summer team. And what we're electing to do is, in place of the existing Snack Shack, which is a trailer that was donated by the Kiwanis Club about 15 years ago, we've been doing Optimus. Yeah. For the last 2 years, we've been doing fundraising. We've gotten enough money to go ahead and put up a facility for the kids with an announcer's box above, kind of compete with all the rest of the schools in Three Rivers League. I've done the permit process, and what I'm looking for today is to see if on the minor site plan review, if you guys could waive the fee of $737 plus the $15 for mailing. It kind of helps out because we just have enough money at this point to do the Snack Shack.
715 plus 50?
37 plus 15.
737 plus 15. Okay. Is your desire to ask staff for a report on this, or do you want to deal with that this evening? Normally we don't do that. It's not an item on the agenda. I think I'd like to hold it over to give staff an opportunity to give us some feedback on it. Did you haven't had a chance to do that yet?
Well, I did have a discussion this afternoon and just laid out because we are doing an addition, building a new structure. We do need to go through the land use process based on the size of it as a minor site plan.
Why don't we talk about that then? If I could put on the agenda for our next meeting.
Well, Mayor, if I'm right, I haven't had a chance to review this with my staff or talk to these folks. Ordinarily, and without having the ordinance in front of me, I have to say ordinarily there would be an ordinance that covers this, and it would explain to us exactly how much latitude we have or the commission has. And of course, my role is one of them is to enforce your ordinances. So within the context of that ordinance, however much flexibility we have, we'd certainly look at that. But unless there's appeal to the commission from that decision, then it wouldn't come back to you necessarily. So I look forward to trying to find a solution for them, but I kind of doubt if it's like most ordinances that it has that much flexibility in it. As you know, even if we relocate a library, we have to play by our own rules. And so if there's an exception, we'll grant it. If there's one in there, we'll certainly look for one. And if there is, we'll accommodate them. And if not, we'll enforce the ordinance.
Okay, next meeting, 2 weeks. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Brian.
Commissioners. Brian Watt, resident of the beautiful city of Oregon City, and I'm a swim dad, and I do some other things too on the side. But I come to you and first of all, thank you, City of Oregon City, for helping the team get in a couple of blocks. And we had our first meet, as you know, and it was a great success. We had over 150 kids there, and we had the MAC Club there, Tualatin Hills. We had another team from Portland, so it was a great success. And hats off to you and the city, and a lot of people that were working on that. So appreciate that very much. We expended some of the funds that we had put forward for the team, and the city also had put some funds forward, and not all of those funds were spent. Some ended up being given back to the city.
because we only did 2 of the 3 projects. I guess the third project is what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. And the third project, which is the slide, and coming up for an option for the slide that will actually allow us to put in lane number 3, or the competitive starting block for lane number 3. Initial estimates and also the estimate that I used for the Metro Enhancement Grant and also to come forward before the commission last year was about 11 or 12,000. Well, we didn't have the exact right person on site. We had one of the owners of the vendor there, and she wasn't the technical expert. When the tech came and looked at it, it was actually more like twice that amount. So we're looking at 25 if you add a buffer, about 20,000, I think is what Denise has come up with several bids already, 20,000 for the slide. So we have some funds remaining. I know that we gave back those contingency funds to the city. I guess the bottom line really is we're looking, speaking on behalf of the team, the team is looking at September, the closure, 2 weeks in September. And something needs to happen soon in order for that to happen in September. The team is right now raising funds with the swim-a-thon. Our intention, the swim team's intention is to up our support even more than we had before. So we would add additional monies to the pot, and we would be asking for additional help from the city to get that job done during the September closure. And Scott and I have been talking about it a lot. Brad's been talking about it, and I think we're ready to move ahead and hopefully make a decision pretty soon on that.
Thank you for the information.
Is there anything Scott wanted to speak to at this time?
I think we'll get back to us, aren't you? So that'll be on, that'll be on another agenda. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I have for citizen comments, correct? Okay, looking at the agenda this evening, is there anything that any commissioner wishes to have reordered, particularly in the consent agenda? Seeing none, then we will take the items in the order in which they appear, which is item number 1 will be a public hearing. This is an appeal of a decision by the Historic Review Board, the approval of conditions of application for Atkinson Memorial Church. And I believe before we begin, Commissioner Smith, do you have something you need to say?
Everyone's going to be surprised because I have multiple jobs in the city. I am an employee of Atkinson Church, and so will not be involved in this discussion or this decision. So,
okay. So you will recuse yourself at this time?
Sure.
Okay.
Are you calling for ex parte right now?
No,
or later?
I'm just starting.
Okay.
So this is a 25 judicial land use hearing, actually an appeal. So the rules that apply are those outlined in our city code and by state statute. I'll ask our attorney to walk us through those rules and ask us about conduct.
Mayor, Commissioners, as the Mayor noted, this is a land use hearing. It's appealed, and I'll start with the usual 19773 warning that the criteria that apply to this are shown in the staff report and are limited to those that are in the notice of appeal. testimony, arguments, and evidence should be directed toward those criteria or in the notice of repair of appeals. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue will preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue, and failure to applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue will conclude an action for damages in circuit court. As you noted, this is an appeal hearing, and what that means is that the decision will be on the record. There's no new evidence that will come in tonight, and in addition, it will be limited to the issues listed in the notice of appeal. And there are three specific issues that, or I believe four actually, if you include the procedural one, that are discussed in the staff report and listed on the notice of appeal. So those are that's the scope of what we're talking about tonight. The final thing is there any bias, conflict of interest, ex parte contacts any commissioner wishes to disclose?
Issues? Yes, prior to the conversation, actually it's a couple of years ago now, I did have a conversation with a neighbor about this impending addition to the church and some of the issues that were being resolved.
And this was before the application was filed?
Yes, way before.
And, okay. Any challenges or additional questions from anybody on the mayor's disclosure of our ex parte contacts? Seeing none, any other commissioners?
Well, we might as well get up on the table the email that I think we've all viewed from the former mayor of Oregon City and some of the responses to it regarding comments that were made by the designated representative of the McLaughlin neighborhood to, I think, the Historic Review Board hearing. And there has been some controversy floating around all of that. I don't know to what extent that is appropriate to disclose specifically, but we've all seen it and we've all received it. I'll disclose too that on Easter, I'll disclose that I occasionally attend Atkinson Memorial Church. So it's not my regular church, but I attend it sometimes. And on Easter, I attended Atkinson Memorial Church, and as I walked outside, a citizen informed me that that the neighborhood had approved the proposed design. I think meaning the neighborhood association, and on that basis, I took the citizen to be expressing a hope that I would respect that expression of the neighborhood association in support of the decision. And I wanted to ask a question about ex parte. Is it limited to? It seems to be, from what I read, limited to obtaining facts outside the record.
That's correct. The idea is that the parties should have a right to know what you're basing your decision upon. Right. And so if you get facts from somewhere else, they should have an opportunity to refute it.
Okay. So if in a casual conversation I express an aesthetic judgment based on my philosophy, that doesn't really count as a factual matter, so that's not really an ex parte.
A couple different things. One is ex parte context is context coming to you. Okay. And so that's an ex parte contact. You have your own set of ideas and expectations, and that goes more towards the question of bias. And if you express a certain view of aesthetics, that may well indicate some bias, but you may have aesthetic view and think this is the greatest thing ever, but it doesn't meet the criteria. And the critical issue for bias is, can you make the decision solely on the criteria in the code, regardless of your aesthetics views?
Okay. Framing it that way, then I don't have a bias problem.
And just to clear out the bias problem, one last thing, your attendance at Atkinson, would that prevent you from making a determination solely based on the criteria in the code?
No.
Okay.
No.
Good. And so finally, getting to the emails, what you had started with, as I assume these emails came about after the decision was made because they talked about what the
yesterday or today. Okay. Very recent. With one.
So
I do too.
Yeah, we have a response
Yeah.
from the neighborhood association chair.
they're not currently in the record. The review is limited to what's in the record. So I guess I would ask first, did all the commissioners read those emails?
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, I discussed the email with one of the people that it was pertaining to.
The substance of the emails was whether or not the neighborhood association representative properly conveyed the neighborhood association's position on it. I guess what I would ask the commission is whether or not they can make this decision disregarding, essentially, you've probably seen, court Law and Order or something where the judge instructs the jury, disregard that last comment. Can you make that decision disregarding everything that you've seen in those emails?
Absolutely.
Okay. With those disclosures, any further comments or questions for the commission? Come up to
Come up to the microphone, please.
Good evening. My name is Mary Johnson, and I'm the attorney representing the appellant in this case. And I think to make a complete record, I would like to know what the substance of those communications were.
And I believe that the general substance of the communication was that, that I have not seen these, that the neighborhood association may or may not have properly represented. What was the
Substance was that the letter writer believed that the land use that the land use chair of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association may have represented only herself and not spoken for a properly called meeting. I believe it's essentially, is that correct? That's the substance of one. And then the response was from the chair of the association, who assured the letter writer of the original email that an email consensus said a meeting had taken place with the land use chair, and that person believed all was in order, and that person was qualified to speak at HRB. That was the two substances.
Any further questions or challenges?
As long as they're not going to pay attention to that.
And I think it's clear that they've all said they can strike that, their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or challenges? Seeing none.
We'll go into process. Process for this appeal will be this. We will have the staff will give us a report in 10 minutes or less. Then the appellant will have, actually, who's first? How's this go?
The applicant always carries a burden, so it should be the applicant, the appellant, and then
So the applicant has an opportunity to present a case for 10 minutes or less, and the appellant then has a chance to present 10 minutes or less, and then citizens or neighbor or recognized organizations have an opportunity to speak to us for 3 minutes pro or con, and then the appellant has an opportunity to rebut. Then we will close the public hearing, and the commission will have an opportunity to deliberate.
One caveat I'd add to that is that because it's an appeal hearing, only those persons or recognized neighborhood associations who participated either orally or in writing left standing to participate.
Okay, so no new information or new speakers may come to the microphone during this. All right, with that, shall we begin? All right,
Madam Mayor.
staff report.
Good evening, commissioners. This is a new area for me. I have not done a historic review board appeal before, so it's a nice challenge. The appeal in question is by Margaret Foss, and it is appealing the Historic Review Board's decision to approve the addition of an education building to the Atkinson Memorial Church. The Historic Review Board also reviewed a demolition application for the Oregon City Preschool, which is the small single-family house that's currently occupied on the site by the Oregon City Preschool. The location is 710 and 718 6th Street in Oregon City.
The block is zoned Mixed Use Corridor 1, MUC 1. And in your packet, there is a exhibit called Site Models and Three-Dimensional Renderings, I believe is what it's called, which gives you fairly good oblique views of the site and the proposed addition. It will show you the general height, setbacks, and architecture that is proposed for the new building. As the commission reviews the appeal, bear in mind that you have the option of affirming the Historic Review Board's decision, thereby denying the appeal and approving the application as submitted, or you may adopt an appropriate condition of approval to address any criteria that you feel has not been met and deny the appeal, or if you feel that the criterion cannot be met through a condition of approval, you should approve the appeal and deny the application. Staff is recommending that the City Commission deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Historic Review Board. The review criteria for proposed additions and new construction in historic review overlay districts is governed by Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.40. Additionally, the city adopted design guidelines for new construction and additions in 2006. Those design guidelines deal with the location, style, siting, building form, design composition, and specific design elements for new construction and addition in the two historic districts, McLaughlin and Kenema. And in addition, the applicant and staff reviewed the proposed development for compliance with the design guidelines for alterations and additions, which the city has had in effect since the 80s. Those design guidelines deal with site, landscaping, building height, bulk, proportion and scale, and exterior features. And the staff report for the historic review hearing, which was on February 23rd, went through and made findings with regard to all of those criteria. In addition to the public comment that was submitted both prior to and at the public hearing, there were letters of support submitted by Denise McGriff of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, which you were just discussing, and also from the State Historic Preservation Office, who recommended approval of the application since they found that the addition and new construction was compatible with the Atkinson Church, as well as met the Secretary of Interior's rehabilitation guidelines. The Historic Review Board voted 4-1 to approve the application for demolition of the existing building and for construction of the new education building. The Oregon City Preschool Building is a non-designated structure within the McLaughlin Conservation District. It's not a contributing structure. The Historic Review Board did attach conditions of approval that require that building be recycled if it cannot be moved, and the applicant is in the process of facilitating that, but that is not the substance of this appeal. They all see, so I will just go through the appeal issues as they are brought up. The first appeal issue is with regard to the public notice pursuant to Oregon City Municipal Code 17.50.090 subsection B1. The appellant commented on the application at the review hearing and brought up the issue of notice because the notice did not state the correct location of the public hearing. It stated the location of the hearing as the old City Hall at 321 Milne Road, and not the actual location of the hearing at the new City Hall where we are now. And the appellant notified staff of that. We created a sign and posted the sign 5 hours before the public hearing, notifying people of the change in location that was posted at the police station and at the municipal court doors. And there's a couple of exhibits in your packet, one that shows the sign and one is an email confirming that the sign was posted from a person who was up at City Hall and doing work for the city. Based on that notice, the appellant was able to attend the public hearing and provide testimony on their own behalf, and no other people raised this issue on appeal. So staff feels that although the public notice was incorrect, the remedy was sufficient to provide adequate notice under the code section. So that is the procedural issue. The other issues with respect to review are we'll go into now. The first issue that the appellant raised was the economic effect of the proposed addition to the value of the historic district. And staff has reviewed this against the code section 17.40.060E3. In the Historic Review Board staff report finding, it was stated that quality new construction that is compatible with the historic nature of the district will add value to the district. Often, historic property owners will choose to invest in the restoration and rehabilitation of their properties when new additions are allowed within the district. The appellant stated that no, it won't, we will lose value, but has not provided any further information on how the criterion is not being met or why this is a reason for denial of the application. The applicant provided a very detailed application with respect to how the application was to meet the adopted standards. The applicant designed the building to be smaller in elevation and with a more residential setback and a 6-foot gap between the parsonage on the site and the proposed education building in order to be consistent with the existing residential buildings. Although the mixed-use corridor zone requires that new buildings be built on or very close to the property line, we have a maximum setback in that zone of 5 feet. The Historic Review Board approved a variance so that the new building could be set back 8 to 9 feet from the right-of-way in order to both mimic the Atkinson Memorial Church setback as well as provide a more residential feel. The applicant also carefully considered exterior materials with respect to adjacent historic properties that were both residential and institutional in nature, such as the Carnegie Center with its brick and the Ermitinger House with lap siding. So with respect to design compatibility with adjacent residential construction, that was significant with regard to not overwhelming or existing residential neighborhood and using compatible design materials and massing. With respect to this, the Commission should review the evidence in the record regarding the economic effect of the new proposed structure and determine its effect on the overall calculation made by the Historic Review Board. And if the Commission finds that the Historic Review Board properly considered the economic effect of proposed changes, it should deny the appellant's point of appeal and uphold the Historic Review Board's finding that OCMC 1740.060E3 has been met. If the Commission finds that the Historic Review Board did not properly consider the economic effect of the proposed changes, it should adopt an appropriate condition of approval to address that criterion. Or if the criterion cannot be met through condition of approval, the Commission should approve the appeal and deny the application. The third reason for appeal is actually several different reasons. They have to do with compatibility with the building, with adjacent structures, with respect to materials, the location of the proposed electrical distribution box, and the building footprint, height, and windows. The appellant alleged that the design of the new proposed addition is incompatible with the existing neighborhood due to the use of 5 different exterior building materials. The applicant, with respect to exterior materials, to show compliance with 1740-060E5, a general compatibility of the exterior design, arrangement, proportion, detail, scale, color, texture, and materials proposed to be used in construction. The staff report finding found that the proposed materials and architectural features as conditioned are acceptable and meet this criterion if the conditions of approval are met. That is the code criterion. The design guidelines for new construction provide specific design elements, which are listed as E1, E2, and E3 in the staff report. The Historic Review Board concurred with the applicant that the materials chosen for the education building have their basis in those found within the immediate vicinity. The brick used for the transition zone reflects that used at the Carnegie Center and the Pioneer Community Center. The lap siding is similar to the siding of many of the historic residences, principally the Anderson House and the Ermitanger House. And the panel board used on the addition offers a smooth finish which reflects that of the church's smooth polished coating. In your packet, the 3-dimensional rendering should show bring it up here. It will show the colors and materials used from various elevations. A little trouble with that. Specifically, draw your attention to sheet that says corner of Jefferson Street and 6th Street, showing the various materials that are used on the building. Where the new education building joins the church is designed to be a very small transition. This is a design technique that's used frequently when a new building is being proposed on a historic building, so that you do not draw your attention away from the bulk and the architecture of the designated structure. That connection is the smallest part of the building, and the connection is also there so as to provide an ADA access ramp from the new building into the church main floor and basement. Based on the staff report, the Historic Review Board found that each of the exterior design materials was chosen to show general compatibility with the existing structure and the adjacent structures in the district. On the site plans, which are under the architectural elevations, I believe the sheet is sheet A11, which is page 6 of the architectural elevations. I'll give you a moment to find that.
Go ahead. Okay. Just go ahead while I'm finding it. In the interest of time, thank you.
Okay. There's a transformer pad located on Jefferson Street. Applicant requested that the electrical distribution box be relocated to the walking area in the site, which is the courtyard in the middle. The site plan and design review process is not yet begun with the application being forwarded to the Planning Commission for review yet, and screening of electrical boxes will be reviewed as a site plan and design review requirement. There are screening requirements for ground-mounted electrical equipment, and there are also safety requirements for access to those boxes that the utility companies may need to access those. So the location of the electrical box would be subject to further review by staff and the Planning Commission. Placement and type of screening shall be determined at that time. With regard to the building footprint, the appellant states that the new building should have no bigger footprint than the existing building and be 3 stories tall within the same footprint now existing, since no one can see the rear windows on the back of the building now. Staff infers from the applicant's written statement that they were referring to the Povey glass windows that are a prominent feature on all of the elevations of the church. Project footprint is approximately 4,349 square feet. The proposed education building will have a footprint of about 4,000 square feet with a 3,656 square foot main floor, a 237 square foot mezzanine, and 456 square foot basement. The education building has been laid out in consideration and deference to the historic Atkinson Memorial Church. The main body of the building has been set back along its 6th Street elevation to not stand in front of the church. A connection will be made from the new building to the church at both floors by use of a breezeway, which is approximately 8 feet in width and designed to disturb as little historic fabric as possible. The connection will be structurally independent from the church and can be removed with minimal disruption of historic fabric. Historic Review Board staff report found that the proposed height and massing of the building is sized so as not to impact the abutting single-family building. Bearing in mind the mixed-use corridor zone does have a height limit of 45 feet, however, the addition is for a 1-story building, essentially, that would be compatible with residential heights. The tallest point of the education building is the elevator tower, which rises 22 feet and well below the main massing elements of the church. The classroom wing is 13 feet 6 inches in height, with piers projecting up 15 feet 6 inches in height, both of which are well below the height of the neighboring 2-story historic houses. With respect to the building bulk, the finding was that in addition to being lower than the church in height, the education building has been carefully articulated to reduce its perceptible massing and bulk along the street frontage. For instance, the relatively long frontage along 6th Street has been divided into discernible groupings made cohesive by careful material selections. The education building has been designed to allow the church to remain visually dominant on the block. The connection through the breezeway is made as visually unobtrusive as possible. The use of the breezeway set back from the facades of the church and education building helps to separate and distinguish the two structures and provide a sense of building spacing intervals along 6th Street more in keeping with that found in the district. Primary design guidelines regarding this issue are the proportions of the proposed addition, height, and massing, and the need to design the building so that it does not overwhelm the existing church. The Historic Review Board concurred with the applicant's proposal. With regard to the Povey windows on the rear of the church, there will be new 4-foot by 7-foot openings on both of the church's levels cut through the existing concrete walls. However, they would keep all existing fenestration and the Povey Brothers art glass windows intact. The windows themselves will remain partially visible from the 6th Street side of the building and will be fully visible from the interior courtyard and the public alley. Based on the staff report, the Historic Review Board's approval of the proposed height and building footprint took into account several important design factors that are repeated throughout the city code and design guidelines and provided adequate support for the proposal as submitted. The issues of the building footprint, the Povey windows, building height, massing, and bulk have all been addressed in detail in response to the applicable code criteria, and the applicant provided adequate rationale for the proposed building design in response to each of these concerns. Staff's recommendation is that if the Commission finds that these criteria have been met, they should deny these appellant points of appeal and uphold the Historic Review Board's finding with respect to Oregon City Municipal Code 1740-060E5, compatibility. If the commission finds that the criteria have not been met, they should adopt an appropriate condition of approval to address those. Or if the criteria cannot be met through a condition of approval, the commission should approve the appeal and deny the application. In summary, the appellant is appealing three parts of the city code. 1750-090C1, which is the procedural notice issue. 1740-060E3, which is the economic effect of the new proposed addition on the historic value of the district, and 1740-060E5, which is the compatibility of the proposed addition on the existing neighborhood. The Historic Review Board found that planning files HR 1001 and HR 1002 comply with all the applicable criteria of the Oregon City Municipal Code and the design guidelines for new construction and alterations and additions as proposed by the applicant. They attach conditions of approval for staff to follow up on with that application. And the application is going to be going before the Planning Commission on May 24th. We're going to put out a public notice for that tomorrow for the site plan and design review and conditional use portion of the application. We issued a notice of a decision for the Historic Review Board on March 1st, I believe it was. And the appellant appealed within 10 days of that notice of decision and has standing to appeal because they testified at the public hearing. And staff's available to assist you with any further questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, I would like to actually ask people to hold the questions till after the public hearing, if possible. Great. We're moving into the public hearing. The applicant has an opportunity to address us for up to 10 minutes.
The applicant, the appellant.
The applicant.
Applicant first, and then the appellant. Yes. Follow the following. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Paul Falsetto, and I work for Carlton Hart Architecture in Portland, and I'm representing the Atkinson Memorial Church. We began our relationship with the church in 2007 when they were thinking about adding space to not only provide classrooms for the education and also to better provide spaces for the Oregon City Preschool, but also to make their historic 1925 building accessible on its two levels. And so in 2009 we began in earnest, and brings us to the design that you see today. We've been talking with all the necessary folk early on in the process because our client has been in the neighborhood a long time and wants to remain a good neighbor. They're very aware of their historic property, which is listed in the National Register, and also the location in a historic district in a historic city. And actually, my firm likes those sort of challenges. How do you add on to a landmark in the neighborhood and also add on in a way that extends and becomes part of a more residential neighborhood in which our church sits? As part of that, we attended a design advice review with the Historic Review Board to get their feedback and their opinions, which we did incorporate. We met with the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association as well and got their feedback. That was incorporated in the final design. And we feel that the design is both respectful to the historic church, and that really is a trick, because usually when you add on to a church, you have to make some level of penetration into the church. And as Pete mentioned, this church has Hovey Brothers stained windows, which are extraordinarily valuable. And they've recently been restored by the church as well. And so our goal is to neither remove a window nor, as best as possible, block there's two large windows that are on the east and west side of the altar that we wanted to make sure our building was shy of. And I'm going to use this little pointer, and that's why our building pulls back, and that's why this is an open area here. And we've really thinned down this portion of the building. And then the education wing in this area, now as it extends away from the church and closer to the neighborhood, wants to be more of the neighborhood. And our neighborhood is filled with, as you know, beautiful, historic, single-family residences, houses that are 2.5 stories tall. Now, we asked not only for an appeal to make sure that our building wasn't set right up against the sidewalk line, which it's allowed to do in this code, but also to make it shorter, as Pete mentioned. We're allowed to go 45 feet. We went half that. We're at 22 feet 7 inches. And actually, that's smaller than the Judge Ryan house. That's a little further down the street. So if you have a 2.5 story building, it's going to be much taller than our building, as our building faces Jefferson Street. We were told that the building should be reviewed both as a new building and as an addition. And we actually took on that challenge because you have two wonderful guidelines, especially the really well-written guidelines for new buildings in the McLaughlin Conservation District. And so we addressed criteria for both those, and we think that we satisfied it quite well. I'm going to address some of the concerns of the applicant. The building actually doesn't have 5 materials on it, it has 3. But we broke up the length of the building as it goes along 6th Street. And I just kind of zoom up here. So basically along 6th Street, we have a fairly long building. And your municipal code says we want you to break that up both with ins and outs of the buildings and ups and downs of the building. You don't want a solid wall. So we moved the building back so it sits actually behind the church itself as you go further down the block. Yeah, and you can see that the church actually sits proud of the building, closer to the sidewalk. And we've broken up that mass with these volumes, and we've actually used paint to kind of highlight that as well. So it might appear that this is 5 materials, it's actually 3. We've got a panel, we've got a brick, and we've got lap siding. It was mentioned that the transformer pad might be of issue. This is really kind of a tricky thing because we're pulling power from a telephone pole right here, and we're required to actually find the closest route into the building, and this is our electrical room here. So to actually try to pull the power through the site, back, over, and into our building requires too many elbows, and we're not allowed to do that as far as the power company is concerned. And also, they need to have a transformer access from the public right-of-way. In case it ever goes bad, in case they have any issues, they need to be able to get to it clearly without having to step on somebody's property. And they use very long poles if it's a hot box to open it. So the location of the transformer pad is pretty well fixed by all those requirements. I hope that addresses most of those issues. I want to kind of be mindful of your time here, but please do know that we've thought long and hard about how this building not only fits into the neighborhood, but attaches onto a historic church. And we've received all the necessary reviews. We've incorporated all the comments we've received and come up with a product that I think the neighborhood could be proud of. And when you talk about value, I know that it's attached to the word economic, but we think that there's a greater value here. And not just the fact that you can have a vibrant district because you can accommodate new appropriately designed buildings, but this building, as I mentioned earlier, does provide access and accessibility to the historic church, and allows that church to continue in its value as it can serve more people with different abilities, people who might need a more adaptable, a more accessible route into its main floor and its basement. And also for the Oregon City Preschool, which before in their house had no way to really accommodate children who might have different abilities as well. And so we're bringing value not only by presenting new and energetic buildings into this neighborhood, but also to allow a greater number of folk to use both these properties. I guess we'll take questions at the end, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Now it's turn for the appellant. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Johnson. My address is 500 Abenaki Road, Suite 4, Oregon City, 97045. I am an attorney. I represent the appellant, Margaret Foss, in this matter. Mrs. Foss lives in an adjoining historic house on Jefferson Street. And what this application would do for her is to take away her view of the Povey window of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and replace it with a transformer pad. That's her own personal concern. But that didn't drive this appeal. What drove this appeal is that the applicant and staff and the Historic Review Board did not apply the criteria correctly, and what we have is an incomplete record that needs to be sent back to the Historic Review Board for further consideration. And I've prepared a number of copies of my remarks tonight, and I'll be going through that. The applicable municipal code section is 1740.060, and there are two subsections there, D and E, that have been applied in some ways. This appeal is only under subsection D, and that's stated in the appeal. There's a reference to subsection D, and the staff characterized this as an appeal under E, so we have a real disconnect there. The difference in the criteria between D and E is that D focuses on, for example, compatibility of the proposed addition with the historic structure, whereas under sub E, those criteria are for a new structure, and the focus there is compatibility between the new structure and other buildings in the neighborhood. And what the Historic Review Board did not do and must do is to apply subsection D.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, I believe this actually raises a new issue that wasn't raised below as far as whether or not the Historic Review Board applied the correct criteria.
The appeal, Mr. Cabizio, is based on subsection D. And you'll see on page 2 of the appeal, subsection D is written there. And the appellant's burden is to show that the criteria have not been met.
I would note that the actual appeal submitted by your client did not have the handwritten 060D. That was actually written by staff as they were reviewing this. The original does not have the 1740 060D. And if you look at the criterion 3 and 5, and you look at D and E, 3 and 5, the language match up on E, not D.
It's not an E3 appeal, it's a D1 and D7 appeal. It's not an E5 appeal, it's a D2 and D6.
I understand your position. What I'm advising the commission is the question of whether or not the Historic Review Board applied the correct criteria is not at issue in this matter. The question is whether or not the Historic Review Board was correct in its evaluation of the economic effect of the structure and the design compatibility with the existing neighborhood. What is actually raised on the issues in the appeal.
I have attached this particular section, and if you look at D1,
page number, please.
Well, it's right after page 9, so it would be page 10 number. It's not numbered.
While she's searching,
And on page 11, D6 says the general compatibility of the exterior design, arrangement, proportion, detail, scale, color, texture, and materials proposed to be used with the historic site. As opposed to in E, it's how it fits with the neighborhood. This is the core problem here. Now, in terms of was this issue raised on this appeal, there is allegation of under subsection D that this that we're going to lose value. Now, everyone has interpreted this as economic value, but this is the historical overlay regulation, and the value isn't economic. The value is historical. And so the applicant and the conditions have to meet the criteria that this application will preserve or enhance the historical value not just of the neighborhood, but of the building itself. Secondly, as to the issue on appeal about the hodgepodge design of the addition, is the criteria has not been met to show that the design of the addition is compatible with the historic building. The record is replete with lots and lots of information on, well, we took the brick out of the Carnegie Center, and we took the flat craftsman features out of the Addison House, the big one where the psychologists are. That's not compatibility with the Gothic Revival Church. We need to be able to, the applicant has not shown the compatibility between the Gothic Revival Church and this very modern looking addition. It's not a new building, it's an addition. And when you look at it, it fills up the whole block. In the last page on my materials, which is already in your record, you can see how massive the addition is. Now, I understand that they've tried to break it up and all of that, but right before that picture is the Secretary of Interior's Standards for Rehabilitation. It's the most recent interpretation regarding new additions to mid-sized historic buildings that was put out by the Park Service that applies. And there's some examples in there about what compatibility means. And I would call the council's attention to that. So those are the basic problems. The applicant is withdrawing her, the issue about the notice was wrong. That's a loser because there was no prejudice shown. And so we'll withdraw that. The location of the electrical distribution box, that's a site and design review issue, and that should be deferred until then. The building height, single story, is appropriate so long as that beautiful, huge Hovey glass window, the public view is protected. I think the council needs to also understand that although the church and the preschool have historically been located on separate lots, they're now being combined into one. So we're dealing only with one historic site with the church that's already on the National Register of Historic Places, and now we're going to put an addition onto that. And so the value of the site, the historic value of the site, has to be considered. The significance of the Atkinson Memorial Church historically is its Gothic Revival architecture and the Hovey stained glass windows. The proposed addition does not reflect Gothic Revival elements or features. The proposed addition is nothing more than a straight line modern design that does not enhance the historic architectural value of the site itself.
You summarize. Yeah.
Okay. Allowing a modern addition to the Gothic Revival Church would be counterproductive to the long-term historic policy of the city to get the whole conservation district listed as a National Register Historic District. This is a big deal. It's going to have long-term consequences and needs to be carefully considered.
Thank you. You'll have an opportunity to rebut the
Nope. Actually, the appellant gets the opportunity to rebut. You can certainly grant the applicant that gets the last word. Yeah, you certainly can have the appellant, but as the applicant carries the burden throughout the process, they get the last word. One additional question, if I can. Was this number 18 in the record? That Okay. I would recommend that you not consider this 18 because it was not considered by the Historic Review Board.
18?
Sorry, if you look at the back of the material that was submitted by Mr. Thompson, yes, correct.
Vice, that's not evidence, that's law, and I would ask that the commission take judicial notice of it. It is a standard that has to be applied under the U.S. Department of the Interior National Historic Register buildings. You have to apply that, and that's law, it's not evidence. It's just properly before the commission.
I would disagree with you about whether it's properly before the board or before the commission. So I would advise that you not consider 18.
Thank you. We'll move then into the public comments.
I get to respond.
Yes. Don't go too far away. Okay, the first speaker, I just remind when people come up to the microphone, please give your name and the city in which you reside. Robert Foss and Kim Walsh.
Hi, I'm Robert Foss, live at 5 West Jefferson Street, Oregon City. Thank you for hearing me today. I feel the addition to the Atkinson Memorial Church does not keep with its character and spirit of the existing McLaughlin Historic District. Living in the Historic District is a lifestyle for homeowners and residents. We're pretty much stewards and caretakers of our homes and to maintain their historic values. We make use of what is already there, so you don't see a lot of new double-car garages and additions all over in a historic town. This is what makes a historic district historic. The addition to the Atkinson Memorial Church would be a very large and overwhelming change in the existing part of the McLaughlin District. It is a half a block long, yet the architect says it has a very small footprint. It is a modern building in every way. It has exterior surfaces. It has every exterior surface imaginable. Lap siding, brick, hardy panels, everything except for what is on the existing church. And this is how they tell us it's going to blend in. If you look across the street to the Carnegie Center, you'll see an addition that was made in the 50s. I didn't even know it was an addition until a few weeks ago. An addition that does not distract from the existing architecture and yet blends in and has withstood the test of time. It's a pretty novel idea considering what we're dealing with right here. Even a member of the Historic Review Board stated that you don't approve something like this in the heart of a historic district. You maybe do it on the edge, but not in the middle of it. If Oregon City is historic about keeping their McLaughlin historic district special and historic, they should not approve the building permit for the Atkinson Memorial Church. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
Hi, my name is Kimberly Walsh, and I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and I also work as an employee of the church as the child care coordinator. I'm here today to ask the commission to deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the HRB. I feel that the addition to the Atkinson Memorial Church will not hurt property values. Atkinson Memorial Church is used by many people from Oregon City, as well as the surrounding communities of Lake Oswego, Portland, Gladstone, Milwaukee, Westland. Thus, the church brings people into our community who are likely to shop here and visit our restaurants. Economic stability and growth is vital for improved property values. Atkinson Memorial Church is pro-community. They do many projects which enhance our neighborhood, thus increasing livability of our community, which also helps property values. The appellant states that the new building should be 3 stories tall. I strongly feel that an addition of 3 stories would not fit well into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mark Mask, with Patrick Sweeney.
Hi, I'm Mark Mask. I live at 514 Jefferson.
You need to give it rest, just down where you live.
I was right there.
Okay.
See the big electric box right across the street? That's my front door.
Okay.
I wrote a few generic notes here,
but I mistakenly thought that this meeting was going to involve the Historical Review Board. I didn't know it was in front of the commission instead. So I still would like to just say what I've jotted down here, Vic, because I think it's still to the point. I wanted to say that for the people who serve on the Historical Review Board, I ask that we remember the reason the board exists. At the meeting in February, we spent a lot of time hearing about how the new building will be handicap accessible, about the wants and needs of the church, and about the visibility of the stained glass windows, but we failed to resolve the biggest problem that the Historical Review Board is supposed to address, and that's the fact that the new building plans do not show any respect for the historical integrity of the neighborhood. Don't kid yourselves, this thing is not attractive, and it will stick out like a sore thumb. I was on the Oregon City Municipal website the other day, and on the website it says, and I quote, "The purpose of the Historical Review Board is to carry out the city's Historic Resources Program. The Historical Review Board reviews public improvements and reviews private and commercial buildings for historic compatibility," end quote. I've seen what happens to homeowners who come to the Historical Review Board with plans for new windows or an addition to their house, or plans to rebuild a carport after it was destroyed by a snowstorm. That happened to my neighbor. The board repeatedly rejects those requests in the name of historical integrity. So I'm confused why are homeowners held to such a high standard of historical integrity and sometimes treated like second-class citizens, it seems, while the church is treated so favorably and allowed to ignore a lot of the concepts of historical integrity that are levied against homeowners like myself. Second, I have some comments that I'd really like to address to anyone who's here representing the church today or who was here representing the church in February. In the last meeting, I noticed that most of you don't live around here. For you, this is not your everyday community. I understand the role the church facility plays in your lives, and I also fully accept the church as a neighbor here in my everyday community. And as the church's neighbor, I respect your needs. I respect your want to build a new building and grow your congregation and have some nice new facilities. I'm not here to try and stop those things from happening, but I am here to ask that your building plans be revised so they better fit into a historical neighborhood. And if you do end up building that modern-looking eyesore that I see in the architect's plans, it serves to me as a clear message that the church does not respect its neighbors or value the uniquely historical quality of the neighborhood. So I'm just simply asking the members of the church, please be a better neighbor than that. So that's my 3 minutes worth. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Patrick?
My name is Patrick Sweeney. I live a couple houses up to the top left there, the corner of Jefferson. And I'm here also to speak towards the disappointment I have with a couple of different things. First, first of the Neighborhood Association for speaking for me and several people that are here representing the very heart of the McLaughlin District. Also, I'm having a lot of contradictions that haven't been answered with the first meeting I went to, and then doing some research of my own. I found the alleged new construction guidelines that were done in 2006 that I guess were cited. There's a section in here that talks about style compatible. And I'll go ahead and read it for you very quickly. Determining the appropriate style of a new infill project is an important initial step in the design process. Each historic district has different styles that were prevalent during the historic period of significance. These styles are what create the historic context. New construction shall complement one of these styles to support the historic context. Use of other styles dilutes and distracts from the historic context of the district. While there may be several styles dominant within the district, the specific choice of a style shall be compatible with adjacent properties, the block, and the neighborhood. It also must be fitting for a particular function in the building and its use. So, being that there is a Queen Anne historic house on the street, Gothic Revival Church and house, and I live in a bungalow that was built around the same time as the church, I don't see how this construction fits anything that's similar in architectural style to the neighborhood and block. So I'm greatly disappointed by that. And then one last thing I just want to leave everyone with is when you look at that picture, think about, could you walk outside your door and have that looking at you as a neighbor? It's one thing to perhaps go to it if you're going to buy a cup of coffee or check into the office, but to be in your neighborhood, it doesn't fit. And I bought 3-4 years ago to live in a historic neighborhood, and I have to question if I saw something big like that, which is the very architecture I ran away from back in Florida. I don't know if I would have bought here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on the docket? Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes, we have another. Is this the last speaker? Speak now. Thank you. Okay. Karen, you wish to speak as well? Okay. Please come up then with Denise. Go ahead, though, Denise.
Sorry. It's not in the record. The email. Yeah, as soon as you're done.
Good evening. I'm Denise LeGriff, and I live in the historic McLaughlin neighborhood here in Oregon City, as do many of the people in the room. And I am representing the McLaughlin neighborhood, as you have already discussed and know. And I want to just say for the record that the only thing that the Neighborhood Association reviewed for this particular application is the criteria by which you are also reviewing this application. We basically found, based on the criteria, that the proposed design is compatible with the design guidelines, and we concur with the staff report. In addition, we concur with the findings of the State Historic Preservation Office in their review. I think that as far as the application is concerned, it is always difficult when you are dealing with something that has to do with style, which is why we stayed away from that in our comments. The applicants have been working at this quite a long time, and I think even before 2007, and they have not gone into this lightly with just throwing something together. They have revised, re-revised, talked to the city, talked to the Historic Review Board, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that they have done a good job in terms of talking to people, looking at the criteria, trying to evaluate this, and trying to make something compatible with the neighborhood, but not yet take away from the historic Atkinson Memorial Church, which is really the primary structure. So that is all I really want to say tonight, and let you know that we again concur with the findings of the Historic Review Board and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen? At the Historic Review Board, I did speak. I'm sorry, Karen Moore, I live outside the city. At the HRB, I did speak to specifically the aesthetics of the building. The function of the structure is not at issue. The function is necessary to the church. I believe Department of Interior criteria is that new construction needs to differ from an historic building to set it apart. However, the criteria I've heard cited is that it needs to fit into the neighborhood. The two comparables that have been cited in the design of the structure are the Ermatinger House and the Carnegie Library. The Ermatinger House predates the McLaughlin neighborhood by 50 years and was transplanted into the McLaughlin neighborhood. The Carnegie Library had to meet an Eastern aesthetic and be approved by the Carnegie Association. Neither of those two structures are consistent with the McLaughlin neighborhood. Using those as the basis of the design is inconsistent with the neighborhood aesthetic. What was cited was that the Gothic Revival Church has some unique structures and shapes. It has peaks, it has arches. This is a square, industrial-looking, or basically institutional-looking building that does not complement either the Atkinson Church nor the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you. Now the applicant has an opportunity to rebut. is 5 minutes, I believe.
How much time am I allowed?
5 minutes.
Inappropriate. It's always a challenge when you need to add or want to add to a historic building. And I'm trying to see if we have some of our drawings here. So this is probably a pretty good drawing. The 1925 Gothic Revival Church is different, distinct, and a landmark in the neighborhood. So it itself is addressing a different sort of an aesthetic. It's not a Queen Anne Victorian, it's not a Craftsman. Our addition to it, as Denise mentioned, in 2007, we actually did an addition that was very similar to the church itself, and the neighborhood association, or members of the neighborhood association, felt it was inappropriate, and it felt like it was an unfortunate addition to a church that doesn't want an addition done cheaply, doesn't want an addition that's a cheap knockoff. So we've employed a strategy that is wholly within historic preservation guidelines of creating a distance and a separation from the church, and then creating a building that has some level of compatibility, but it's not going to look exactly like that church, and that church doesn't want something that looks exactly like it next to it. Plus, nobody can afford to do that nowadays. So this breezeway here is set 10 feet back. It's about as narrow as it can get. It's actually, it allows the connection, as Pete mentioned, 4 foot by 7 foot opening into the church, and we set the mass of the building back from it. Now, the Historic Review Board in the design advice said, can you give us a better material for this, what we're calling the transition zone? Because we had it as a panelized building. So we were encouraged to look at the Carnegie Library, which is indeed brick, and at cost, and at great cost, we decided to go ahead and make that change and allow this portion of the building to be of brick. And what we've done is we've decided that there's kind of a joint, if you will, between this portion that really does serve the church. It allows access into the church on its 2 levels. And then this portion of the building, which wants to feel more like the neighborhood. Now the question is, what scale does this building want to be? And when you take a look at the neighborhood, as was mentioned earlier, we have a whole variety of styles. We've got Queen Anne Victorians, we've got Gothic Revival, we've got Classical Revival, we've got a Craftsman, which is the Andreessen house that's kitty corner and one building over. We've got stick style. So which style do you choose? And what we've tried to do is actually choose a building material, this lap siding, that we felt was appropriate and similar to the Andreessen house. If I had an image here, I'm not sure if I do. I'm not going to go digging for it for you, but and then actually to hold the scale of the building down as well. And so we're choosing what we consider to be an appropriate material. We're sizing the building so that it's not overpowering the neighborhood as it moves away from the church, as it transitions from the church and into the neighborhood. Now, it was mentioned that the Secretary of Interior has 10 standards based on rehabilitation, and we know those quite well, and we've addressed those. And the Secretary of Interior also knows that those standards can be addressed in a whole variety of ways. So they've come out with what's called preservation briefs. And I'm going to bring this up because this actually supersedes what was presented here just recently, and this was presented by the city planner during the Historic Review Board hearing. It's Preservation Brief 14, and it's entitled New Exterior Additions to Historic Buildings, Preservation Concerns. And Christina Robertson Gardner, the city planner on this, spent a fair amount of time going through and explaining this to the board and explaining this to the audience as a way of pointing out that our building is appropriate, does address current detailed standards by the National Park Service. And the National Park Service has basically its entity in the field is the State Historic Preservation Office. We have 50 of them. Our State Historic Preservation Office reviewed our design. These are the experts, and approved the design. So basically, the staff has approved the design. The State Historic Preservation Office has approved the design. The Neighborhood Land Use Chair agrees that it's appropriate to the neighborhood. The Historic Review Board has approved the design. So there's been a lot of knowing entities that have reviewed this and feel like it's an appropriate design for not only an addition to a historic building, but also for the neighborhood. And we are indeed sensitive to the POVI windows. Our building, as I mentioned, steps back and still allows that window to both be visible and to allow its natural daylight into the space, which is really critical. And happy to take questions. I don't know if that's appropriate, but thank you for this opportunity to rebut.
Thank you. Do we maybe have questions again?
I have a question. If you,
Commissioner Nocita.
okay. Thanks for coming out and sharing your time and vision with us. I have an initial quick question to just clarify my own recollection on what brick veneer is. When you say brick veneer, are you saying an exterior in brick where a mason comes in and lays every single brick, or is brick veneer what I've seen elsewhere where in some factory, some manufacturing plant, this entire wall is built that looks like a brick exterior, but it's basically a wall and it's just kind of brought in a crane and put in place on the facade. What is planned for this building?
Right, and it would be the mason's brick. Nowadays, nobody does a true double or triple white brick wall. That's brick that actually is load-bearing, holds itself up, and holds the structure up. Nowadays, what we do is we have a substructure behind, and we actually have ledger plates that hold the brick. And we call it a veneer. It's a true brick.
Ledger plate. What is that?
It's a steel item that goes out and is suspended from the structural wall, goes out and receives the brick as the brick is laid vertically up. And so, for all intents and purposes, almost every brick building that you've seen that's been done maybe in the last 40 to 50 years is a brick veneer. But it is a true brick 3.5 by 3 by 8-inch unit with complete mortar and everything. So it's not Z brick. It's not the evil, dreaded Z brick. It's true brick wall.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Neely?
You described the lot siding and the brick areas. You have these areas that are blank without windows. Could you describe what those are? If I were to look for something incompatible, that would be it. And
Yeah,
I
so
don't
what's-
understand it.
So, Commissioner, you're saying what's going on here?
Yeah, what's going on there?
The education wing has been very efficiently designed, and the classrooms, you can see that there's 4 classrooms on this elevation, each marked by a window. And what sits in between this classroom, we'll call it Classroom A and Classroom B, is this panelized wall system. And that's one way for us to kind of break up the long elevation. And what's going on behind it, and I have to see if I can find a plan here. So here's that exact panelized wall system here. Here's Classroom A and Classroom B. And this is where the movable wall gets set, right into that space there. And we were looking at the time of having chases for the heating and ventilating as well. So it's part of the efficient design and layout of the building. And it's another way of kind of breaking up the mass. You can see that a tree has been planted in front of it. In the elevations, especially these construction drawings, we don't necessarily put the trees in front of it. But there will be a nice tree in front of that as well.
What is the material? What does it look like?
It is a cementitious board, and we've actually used it here in what we're calling the transition zone because the smooth surface and fairly homogeneous size allows it to replicate kind of the smooth parch-coated surface of the church itself. And so even though we're showing the lines, the joint lines here, they won't be nearly as obvious as that. And it just is a nice, smooth transition from this smooth-faced church to our brick building, and we decided to actually use it in these locations as well to kind of replicate some of the massing of the building as it moves along 6th Avenue and turns the corner. And in this case, we're using it to highlight the entry to the Oregon City Preschool.
So does it look like stone or look like wood, or what's it look like?
It's like cement board. It
Like
could
cement
look
board.
like a smooth-faced stucco because we would indeed use smooth-faced on it. So it's just a smooth-faced board. These are about 4 foot by 4 foot sections of it. Like I said, would have reveals, but the reveals would be fairly minimal.
What are you talking about? First of all, you're right. Move out to the neighborhood. This area is very eclectic. There's all kinds of styles in it. I guess in terms of the structure we were just talking about, you mentioned pulling design features from the surrounding area. What exactly does this represent? You indicated it gives some indication of the nature of the church. I don't know if it would be the same colors or what.
I'm trying to find our color elevations. They might be further down, or maybe Pete, you
Well,
look at it.
the color doesn't look like the church. I can see that.
We have an instructional one.
There's our church here, large building. It's got a color that's called coral brown, but it's since faded to sort of a pinkish color. And likely it was a gray or white
in its day. We've decided to actually begin to kind of correspond or correlate to be compatible with that sort of pinkish color, and we've picked a brick that is kind of a soft rose color brick, and then this panelized system here would be painted similar, so that this whole transition zone reads as a single entity that, as I mentioned, feels like it's more of the church. It has color that responds to the church. We've tried to create these larger openings here. I know that we haven't done the Gothic pointed arch. We've created large apertures here and along here that are something that we see in the church. You can see one down here.
May I ask why you decided not to use the Gothic arch?
It just didn't feel like it was an appropriate to a flat-topped building of this type. And I don't know if we were to do a pointed arch, it would have to start right about where this guy's head is and come up and over. And it just didn't feel like it was part of the design of this addition, and it felt like it would, in a way, kind of, half mock that beautiful Gothic pointed arch of the church. And what we really don't want to do is we don't want to steal thunder from the landmark. And so our goal, as I mentioned, is let's pull our building back, let's create this 10-foot joint, and then let's let this building be quiet and stately, and begin to pick up some of the quality materials. Brick is a masonry material, and the church is a parch-coated masonry material. The color wants to be in keeping. And then beyond that, you can see that we switched to the lap siding, we switched to the panel board. I'm trying to see, right. And so here's our understanding of the neighborhood. We've done this pretty early on to know what was around. It shows the variety of different building types. And granted, the Carnegie Center tends to be a building design that you might see on the East Coast, but it is here in Oregon City, and it is it's been designated a contributing building to this district, it's part of this district, and my research shows that the Ermatinger House is that as well. These are contributing members of the district. And we would look at the brick use and the kind of this pier system with these windows that we see in the Carnegie Center. We looked and were really inspired by both the Andreessen House, this craftsman, and this really gorgeous, stately Ermatinger House. It's one of the oldest houses around. You can see that it's actually fairly square as well. And for one of the oldest houses, it has those clean classical proportions that are almost strikingly modern in a way.
Since you've got the Andreessen House up, I'm gonna telegraph something that I'm gonna comment on later, because I think there are elements of the Andreessen House which are significant that you've ignored. And the two I have in mind are the basalt porch and then the arched roof of the porch. I'll just make those comments now, and when we discuss it later, I'll talk about that in more detail.
And what we did try to address was the issue of the porch, and we created our own porch here. It's more modern. It's more stripped down, and it doesn't have the beautiful basalt material. But again, it's the symbol of this building at its entry point reaching out, similar to what we see at the Andreessen House. It's not designed exactly like it, but it picks up cues, or at least it picks up its use from the Andreessen House.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
I guess if I were going to express an aspect of the transition that concerns me a little bit is the rapid change that you're going in terms of the church itself and into this other structure. The breezeway looked a little bit more material like the church itself, but it would make me feel a lot more comfortable. It looks like you are in fact extending some of the architecture of the church then into the new structure, and that's just something that struck me. It's not a very big area. I don't know if there's a whole lot you can do about it, but that's something I thought about.
We did think about it, and usually what I'm trying, I don't mean to scroll through this too much, but I wanted to show this. This is the area right here we're attaching to, this little zone right here. And what's been done and approved and considered actually appropriate is to do what's called the glass or glazed connector, where it's all glass, and ideally it kind of goes away because of that. We felt that having something that was all glazed in that area would call too much attention to itself. So that's why we went with something, as you mentioned, that feels like it's a little bit more of the church in that it's mostly wall with some punched openings. And so, again, in our modest way, we're trying to append to the church in a manner that's appropriate, but it doesn't detract from the church. It kind of allows the church to terminate properly at this point and allows us to make a subtle transition to a new building, basically.
May I ask you about the second color? The first color I understand with the brick, but the second kind of orangey, how'd that get selected?
And it's more of a harvest brown. We wanted something that was more earthy in tone. I know the computer doesn't quite show it. It really kind of, but we actually submitted color chips to the Historic Review Board. I don't think they're on here. It was just a way to transition and to allow this building to be distinct and to kind of pick up on more of the earthy colors that the Craftsman buildings tend to have. And in a way, I'm going to go back here, it kind of calls forth a little bit of what we were seeing over at the Carnegie Center, which has this deeper color for a body and then lighter color for highlight areas. I'm not saying that that's going to be what the color ends up being, but that's where we were at this time back at the first of the year.
Okay, shall we, any more questions of the applicant, and then we'll close the public hearing and go into our discussion. Thank you very much. Let's close the public hearing. Can we take a break? We'll like to take a break before we come back to that. Let's take a 5-minute break. So come back at 2019 till recess session. So commissioners, this is your opportunity to ask questions either of staff or each other and make your deliberations. Who wants to begin? Commissioner West.
It's kind of a coincidence. A week ago, I went to a CLG training, which is from SHPO, from the State Historic Preservation Office here in Oregon City.
CLG.
Certified Local.
Certified Local Government. Thank you. Sorry. And it was a training for staff and for people on the Historic Review Board and anybody who wanted to come. But one of the nicest things about this training, and they were talking about historic renovations, restorations, and then also, just like this, additions. And what was great, though, is they didn't read this whole PowerPoint presentation. It was all photographs before and after. So it was really easy to see what they were getting at. And so the big thing I have learned that day, and as with the applicants tonight, is that you don't want your addition to compete with your original design and to mirror it. And so many of them were just totally separate additions. For instance, there's a fire station on Sandy Boulevard. I don't know, it's around 40 if any of you see it, with a brick original and then a diagonal shutting out totally contemporary building, but probably has reasons, just like the applicant tonight was saying. Because when I trying to make the case for his design here, because I did on initial looking at that, I would not know how it tied in, but after I read and understood the materials, what did they call those? You know, the stucco and the brick to mirror the Carnegie and the lap siding, and it just all made a lot more sense to me, and I really appreciated that this design was not a 3-story design. I do not see how that would have ever fit in the neighborhood. That would have been harder to accept, I believe, if it was the same height as the church and not this. So I understand where they're going with this. Maybe I don't know if I would have designed it. I'm not an architect, and I think it's respectful to the neighborhood in that it scales back as it goes around the corner with the houses and keeps the massing with the housing style. So let's just start.
Okay, Commissioner Nocita.
Okay, I'm going to start with what I do appreciate about the design. I think as some of the criteria speaks to massing and proportion and things like that, and I think that's very well done in this design. The massing kind of sloping down from the church tower on the one hand, and also the street sloping down kind of correspondingly in opposite proportion is kind of a neat thing. The recessed parts of that facade on both the transition area and the expansion are good too. Where I have trouble with this, and the trouble is it's a potential deal breaker for my vote on this, is with the design of the exterior. And I brought a bit of show and tell here because to share ideas that I'm interested in. folks have probably heard of Pioneer Square. They called it the Portland's living room, Portland's outdoor room. That term did not begin with Pioneer Square. It actually came out of this book, which is from the mid-19th century. It's called The Art of Building Cities by Camilo Seite. First read this back in planning school. And it's influenced a lot of designers and architects. And basically the idea is that good urban spaces are kind of like an outdoor room. You know, you have a public space in the middle, and the building facades around the square or something have to have a very rich facade texture to kind of create the atmosphere of that outdoor public space. And the Carnegie Square around the library and its, you know, the four spaces across the street from it really form one of Oregon City's really true public squares with really appropriate architecture captured, you know, capped by the Atkinson Memorial Church, which I think is the most beautiful building in Oregon City. So given the importance of both the space and the existing architecture in that space, I think this is an instance where you really have to raise the bar on how you design both new construction and additions to existing constructions. And though I agree that the proportions of the structures are appropriate and do provide that kind of building wall for this public space, the materials that have been chosen are utterly inappropriate for the facade. They're not authentic. The idea of covering this with cement fiber planks, cement fiber squares, now that I have the clarification that the brick is true masonry, I'm less concerned about that. But even then, what this site commands as far as facade can and should be so much more as far as authenticity of what Oregon City architecture and design is. And that's where I want to get back to what I said about the house. I forgot the name of it already. The Andreessen House. That site sits on basalt. Basalt is a native, authentic architectural material that should be considered in place of something utterly phony and inauthentic, like fabricated cement planks and fiber cement sidings. So and the blank walls themselves, I really have an issue with that. Is, you know, what is it doing? I think it's doing violence to that space. So based on the appropriateness of the volumes and the proportions of the structure itself, I could accept, you know, sustaining this project with very rigorous conditions. But I cannot accept, because this type of development is so permanent, it's going to outlast any of us mere mortals. Something in a space that is as important as the Carnegie Block really commands that we really raise the bar really high on something like this. So for discussion purposes, I know we have some more to discuss, but I think one way to do this would be to approve the project with rigorous conditions on rethinking the especially the authenticity of the materials used on this facade. And I think the facade could become more complex, and I'll give you two examples of what I mean by that. Brick facades, for example, there are great examples everywhere. I've seen them in Portland. They're done with, you know, the tradition of the old arts and crafts movement from the 19th century, whereby, for example, some bricks are popped out in relief, you know, from a rather blank brick wall, and really give it some character. You know, window frames in stone are used instead of just, you know, titanium, whatever. some of the dentiled parapet around the Carnegie Library as an example. Having a crown, some of these blank walls are square. They could also be designed as, kind of round bays to respect the round major portion of the Atkinson Church, and they could have a crown on top of it, for example, either in the square or the round versions. But there's just so much more that can be done with rich respect for design that don't necessarily have to be so cost prohibitive that they would make it impossible. But given what we're trying to achieve in Oregon City, or at least what I think we're trying to achieve in Oregon City as far as authenticity and sense of place for our community, I just can't accept as appropriate and compatible with either the church or the neighborhood the idea of using these artificial materials like the cement fiber board and fiber planks.
Before I call on the next speaker, may I ask planning commission, so this is an appeal from the HRB. So if it were upheld, then the process is that it goes back to HRB, or what?
You can do a couple different things. One option would be to remand it back to the HRB for them to review issues, including compatibility. Another would be to place conditions upon it that are clear enough and give sufficient direction to achieve your purposes. And
them to review, or just
one option may be to say we approve it, but we also that they'll change the facade material and get HRB approval of those changes in the facade materials. There are a variety of options you can go through. One question would be if, in fact, we were to go back to, I was wondering, would that have to be in a land use process? And it probably would, because this is critical to the compatibility issue, which is a criteria. So it would probably be going back through but it could be done as a type 2 process.
This application has not been to the planning commission yet.
It's not.
Which will deal with some design issues, but not the historic features of it, correct?
It's a conditional use in the zone, if I remember correctly.
Site plan and design review criteria will make some reference to the Historic Review Board's findings, but they're more of a general compatibility requirement, and it's looking at massing and proportion and materials in a much more general way than the Historic Review Board is.
There could be that an approval with a condition that during the conditional use review, different facade materials will be presented that respect some of what we've heard so far tonight. And if in fact somebody doesn't believe that the materials properly reflect what we've heard tonight, it can be appealed to this commission again. That might be a way to avoid having an additional.
I would just note that there's already a condition of approval on the Historic Review Board's approval of this application to go back for review for certain features, specifically the parapet, canopy, window trim, and one other feature which I don't recall, but it's a condition of approval for.
Okay. While you're looking at that, we'll call on Commissioner Neely.
I know why I don't believe that I would not suggest that we put on rigorous conditions. I have some of the same kinds of concerns that Commissioner Nocita has. In fact, I'm a little bit suspicious that maybe the architects had some of these concerns since some of the areas that you were concerned about, they appear to be trying to hide the trees. And I've got no objection to trees, but I do agree that the materials have to be looked at. I don't think that we should go through the details saying, well, something should be granite or something should be something else. My preference would be to take it back to the Historic Review Board and review the material that's there and have other materials put forward, because I have those concerns as well.
I think those are good arguments. And the tree, you have to say the same thing about the trees. I would concur. again, I don't want to tie the hands of the church to dictate a particular material, but
Madam Mayor.
yes. what
One
we
additional
do-
issue with remand is the 120-day clock.
Where are we?
I believe it's early May that the 120-day clock is expiring. I believe Pete may have had some conversations with the applicant about whether an extension were possible, and you might relay those.
Spoken to the applicant about the 120-day deadline, which would be May 1st, I believe. And they've indicated that they might be willing to grant an extension to that 120 day, but I would ask them to come up and speak to that.
Record's closed. Mr. Kunkel asked if the record's closed, and this is procedural issues that I believe that the applicant can in fact come and talk about the 120-day, not provide any additional evidence or concerns about responding to the compatibility issues.
Would the applicant like to take that opportunity? Yeah, to respond, yes. You need to come forward to say more than that. Please.
I recall, we submitted the application February 1st, and so 120 days is 4 months, and that should take us into June. So I want to make sure that we actually need to have an extension.
Check the completeness on the.
How about this? If in fact if we have to remand it back to the Historic Review Board, that would get them the May hearing, which means most likely early June, late June would be the most likely next commission meeting, which would mean, assuming there's a hearing then, bring it back for finding at the first meeting in July, for findings in July, which would mean an extension to essentially early to mid-July to make sure we meet that that deadline. If an extension is necessary, we can do that. If an extension isn't necessary, we won't need it. Does that make sense to?
That's what we have to do. Yeah, we're trying to get out of the ground midsummer. We need to start digging before it gets too wet there, so that's our deadline.
You'd be willing to grant an extension to allow the commission to adopt findings at its first meeting in July? Is that what I'm hearing, if an extension is necessary? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, it sounds like you're perhaps ready for a motion or to create a condition of approval or remand. I mean, I think you have some options here, so
My
how would you like to do it?
My
Commissioner Neely.
My preference is to remand it to the Historic Review Board so they can review these. What we're going to say are different materials that are currently used. I think they have to have that deliberation rather than us. I know there's some expertise here on our commission, but I think having a broader group talking about it is important.
And they've already put conditions on which will fly with them to the planning commission, is that correct?
Yeah,
Were those
I'm pulling
conditions?
those up now.
I'll sound out my colleagues on this. In addition to the materials, although I may have spoke too harshly in saying rigorous conditions of approval, but I would, in addition to a remand on the materials, I would maybe in a more aspirational manner exhort the applicant to consider a more profound architectural design as well.
Well, I think I'm not interested in making that a condition of approval. You know, after through the discussion, I guess if they, I prefer to let that go through the process. I think it was interesting. My last trip to Washington D.C., there were many buildings that it was new to me. We've not had an application like this where we have a historic structure and then a addition, and I didn't know that it was supposed to be. It really helps me look at old buildings differently to know that it's not supposed to look like the original. And there are so many that they're a little bit jarring to the senses to see it sometimes. but I guess you clearly know which part is old and which part is new. I think there's a part of me that wishes that the design were more compatible, but I guess if the experts who've been doing this for years say that, and the compatibility I think can be gained in the materials. So that's the one I'm interested in. How do we do this?
And when I heard conditions of approval, that we're not really approving it. What we're doing is remanding it to the Historic Review Board, or what I'm hearing you say, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're remanding to the Historic Review Board with instructions. Those instructions consist of one, to consider applicants, with instructions to the applicant and the Historic Review Board to consider different materials for the facades to more
authentic,
more authentically
compatible.
Reviewing to the Historic Review Board and the applicant to consider changes to the materials in the facade that are more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and authentic to Oregon City. Would that be a fairly...
That sounds good.
Okay.
Fairly good.
Any other instructions to the applicant or Historic Review Board as part of the remand? I know we've heard at least one that...
I'm not interested in that one.
Not even in terms of encouraging.
Well, so you could certainly say encouraging a review of architectural.
Yeah.
Well,
but
I don't think we move one little piece and the whole rest. I mean,
Right.
they've got a nice design.
Yeah. I think that's probably too late in the process for that.
I'll move to remand
Make sure our attorney listens so I can make sure it's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Move to remand. We're not remanding the appeal, are we? Should I put it in that form?
Remanding the application.
Remanding the application back to the Historic Review Board to consider changes to the material that are more authentic and compatible to the McLaughlin neighborhood, yes.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Neely, second by Commissioner Nocita. So further comment or discussion? Seeing none, Nancy, the vote please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Aye. And Mayor North?
Aye, motion passes 4-0.
One final procedural note.
Yes.
The remand will go back to the Historic Review Board. If in fact they get it right and satisfy, or regardless of whether they get it right or, it may not come back to you if nobody appeals it.
Okay.
That's the final decision. However, if somebody isn't satisfied, they may appeal it to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone who has
Thank you and good luck.
appeared before us. Yes, good luck. Okay, next on the agenda, let's move along. We still have some big items here to talk about. Next is continuance of 6-month review of the development code amendments. This is the commission report, which just jumped. Tony, are you doing this?
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to go ahead.
Yes, please,
Okay.
please. Rush right into it.
We had a joint planning commission, city commission work session last Tuesday to go over the code amendments, the 6-month update. We had to have our materials ready for tonight's hearing the next day. There were several issues raised at that work session, so we are requesting a continuance of tonight's hearing to the May 5th, 2010 city commission hearing to allow us time to respond to the issues raised during that work session in an appropriate manner. We would recommend that if citizens did come to participate or provide public comment tonight, that you do hear that testimony. If you have any other issues that you'd like to direct the staff to try and address, please do. Otherwise, please do. We are recommending continuing the public hearing to May 5th, 2010.
Okay, we've had an extensive code review. Has anyone come tonight with an issue to present to us? Seeing none, may I have a motion for continuance to May 5th, please? Second. Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Nocita. For continuance, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Right.
Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Smith? Aye. Mayor North?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next, we actually are not discussing, I should mention that at the top of the agenda, a sales contract this evening because we do not have it yet from the school district for our library possible purchase, but I'm going to ask our library director, Mo Cole, to give us the latest update on negotiations with the school district. It's a report. Just a moment. Mr. Kleisman, did he participate in the report?
Yeah, there isn't any deliberation. It's procedural. You can probably see it there, but yeah.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners. We had hoped, as you mentioned, to bring a contract tonight. I just want to let you know that we did pursue some serious negotiations with the school district, and we can discuss those at length. We have the contract in front of you, which hopefully will be at the May 5th meeting. Let's see, since we are not talking about that tonight, I did want to report an answer to one of Commissioner Neely's questions about parking at the Carnegie Center, and his question was, could we designate parking around the block specifically for patrons of the Carnegie? And the answer is no. If you designate specifically, you can't count that towards your parking. That will be credited towards your building. And so, that's what we're thinking. Why are you looking so?
I hadn't gotten involved in
No, because it was just I thought it was just a simple question. It's really nice.
If I might, even if you designated the parking in terms of a time period when it could not be used, and not necessarily restricting it 24 hours, but restricting it into the period of time the library is open.
I haven't researched that. I'm a little troubled by using the right way to dedicate to specific uses. Often what you see, for example, outside hotels is 15-minute waiting zone. It's pretty clear what the use is intended for, but it doesn't say only for the use of, the Marriott. And saying it's only used for this particular purpose could be problematic, but I'd have to look into it a little further.
Get back to us on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, so there's always more to update you on. See you in 2 weeks.
Hopefully with a contract.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, I appreciate the fact that we have two professionals from Tri-City Wastewater Plant who have been waiting a very long time, but I hope you've learned a lot about historic review in the meantime. But I think before I call on our Public Works Director, Nancy Krakauer, to get into this, I would like to sort of set this into context. It's been a long time since we talked about Tri-City, and so I would kind of like to go back in history just a little bit to remind us all kind of where we were. Back in 2004, I think it was, the county approached the city about sewer consolidation issues, and we talked about it and determined that we already had a plan on our waterfront, and that we would be a good partner. And this is our letter from March 17, 2006, where we said these things. If it's determined that regionalization of sewer service in one plant is best, and the best location is Oregon City, our requirements are as follows. 1, ensure that the code development proposed by Pacific Property Search is not hindered by the plant expansion. This will need to involve a land swap to meet new design changes to this point. 2, ensure that the plant is built to the highest standards to assure synthetics and odor control. This may involve putting the plant indoors. 3, provide access at no cost to Oregon City to the plant's effluent and treat it to at least level 4 so the city can use it for irrigation purposes. 4, negotiate a host fee with all parties consolidating in the treatment plant to be paid to Oregon City with no strings attached, and we kind of go through what that was to be. Then provide a cash contribution to the development of off-site ball fields, accommodate light rail right-of-way in the Tri-City Master Plan, and collaborate in developing an acceptable system of governance for this authority. That's where we started, and Oregon City was sat at many tables I sat at one of the wastewater partners groups, as well as on the Tri-City Sounding Board, where we developed the master plan. I believe it was in 2006, and I passed out to everybody the guiding principles at which we all agreed, and the people around the table were members of the Tri-City group. So there were a counselor from Westland, a counselor from Gladstone, I from Oregon City, and then we had staff as well at that from both cities, and the county commissioner was there. So it was a pretty broad group. But these were the things that were very, very important to us then and still are. One, because it's on our waterfront, and we did agree to be, again, not part of the problem, but part of the solution, as Oregon City has many times in the past, as you see all of the things we have on our waterfront. But these are the principles. Relate to and create a sense of place and community. 2, emphasize Tri-City's service district's mission, water quality, and riparian ecological responsibilities by complementing and enhancing the area's natural features. It is to be a place that people could go to see best practices. 3, provide a facility with architectural design vocabulary that's pleasing and low profile. The facility should provide a variety of distinguishing spaces within, such as water features, gardens, open spaces, and small-scale interpretive features. And then 4, demonstrate a continuous commitment to the environment and the community by maintaining the quality of the natural and the built environment. And so as we went through all the discussions and the wastewater partners plan came up with, which I was now elected chair, we had to give up the host fee. But what the county had said in return, and our constant message has been that the 2 outstanding issues then, if we don't have a host fee, is that there must be some kind of mitigation for not having that host fee. We'll be hosting part of the regional solution on our waterfront. So we're giving up our waterfront. And we could have said, and we actually debated in many of those meetings within our city commission, what if we did say we don't want that on our waterfront anymore? We agreed not to go that direction. But in return, the mitigation could be off-site. Definitely the plan has to be green. It has to be a show place. And I know in that summer master plan discussion we talked about it being a place where visitors could go for not just meeting spaces, but to, again, look at some best practices. We wanted to be able to use the gray water, and the design features, again, we wanted to be compatible with the surrounding community, because we do have a major development going in next door, and we had a presentation from that group and talked about that. So I think just to set that as Oregon City's expectations, which have changed, we have not seen the master plan that now has gone through after our planning commission. So this will be our first exposure to that, and we'd like to, I guess you can come up to the microphone while Nancy is setting the stage here for where we are in the design and master plan process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, Commissioners. Well, we are deep into construction at the Tri-City Wastewater Treatment Plant Expansion Project, as you've seen by the large cranes that have been towering above for, many, many months now. And as we get into farther and farther into construction, there have been a number of questions coming up about some of the details of the project, particularly in the public rights of way and on the exterior. And then another another interesting factor has been there's some very very important coordination with the Clackamas Cove development that is needing attention so that we can work out agreements for some of the details of that and the coordination between the 2 projects. Realizing that Clackamas Cove could provide an incredible amount of tax increment for our community and the economic development in terms of even the jobs of construction, et cetera, for both the public infrastructure and the private development, mean jobs for Oregon City and Clackamas County, and the result should be beneficial to both agencies. So I asked Randy at your request to come to give an update on the construction and expansion project, and perhaps to talk to you a little bit about the details of the master plan, because I know It's been a long time since you guys had a briefing on it. So Randy Rotain, who's one of the project engineers at the site, and he's been with Water Environmental Services for a number of years, is here to talk to, and Doug Law, who's the finance director for Wes. Is that your title?
She's the capital program manager these days.
Okay. I've always known Doug to do all the financial planning for the district. So we're here to give you a presentation and update, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm the engineering supervisor for Water Environment Services, and on this particular project, I'm serving as the project manager. As Nancy was saying, she asked us to come down and talk a little bit about I'm calling it the concept plan for conditional use. She wanted me to talk a little bit about the phased expansion and how that's going to come about, where we're at with the construction, and comment a little bit on the coordination with the code development. In 2002, prior to the 2004 discussion with Oregon City, there was a concept plan that included ball fields, constructed wetlands, floating dock features. At this time, we were looking at expanding the plant at Tri-City per conventional methods. To do that, we had to purchase the Rossman landfill, and we had to enter into a remediation action plan with DEQ in order to purchase that. And we needed that land because conventional treatment requires a lot of tankage, a lot of erosion basins, which would have moved us, I think that's about a 14, 16 acre site, would have moved us probably 2/3 or more, maybe halfway down that entire Rockland landfill. We were also asked to provide some sort of contribution to community, open space, and parks and ball fields. So that's what that concept plan looked like at the time.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Maybe you're going to get to it already, but when you've excavated for the current expansion, were you excavating into at least parts of the old Rossman landfill?
The Rossman landfill excavation won't occur until we need to go to phase 3 of the liquid expansion. At that time, we'd be migrating out into, and possibly phase 4, I think it might be phase 4. At that point, we'd be migrating, and I have that in my slide. I can get into that when we do that. But for this first phase, we are not touching the landfill. Final concept plan, after the code development came in and discussions with Oregon City came about, we modified the concept plan, changed the ball field, started looking at, based on some of the criteria or requests that they received, looking at technology that would meet the future probability or possibility for effluent reuse, looking at minimizing our footprint on Rossman landfill, to meet those, and also going green and trying to do everything we can to meet the sustainability criteria. We opted to go with a membrane bioreactor, which takes up quite a bit less space and puts us in a position to meet the effluent quality and also any permitting issues that may come about in the future that a conventional plant may not be able to meet. So the site concept plan is a long-term plan. Right now, at the time they developed this plan, they were projecting full build-out to about 2050. It's kind of laid out in 7 phases. We're in the first phase right now with the liquid expansion. Each phase, this first phase, is able to treat an additional 4 million gallons a day dry weather flow. They come up with those EDUs, or equivalent dwelling units, is basically a home for those that don't use those terms. Doug's here to make sure I don't talk in too many acronyms. You've already kicked me twice. So,
Yeah.
So that equates to about 4 million gallons a day of dry weather. So this is the existing plant. What we're seeing here in gray is the influent pump station on the top. Maybe I can point to this if I go. So it's coming in, going through the primary clarifiers, through the aeration basins, out to the secondaries. And at this point, it's discharged, goes through a chlorine contact chamber, is dechlorinated. The effluent outfall line is going down Agnes and continues down through the landfill to Main Street, where it connects into a trunk line that discharges into the Willamette River around Clackamas Park. So the phasing plan. The first phase we're into right now, and that's liquid expansion. What you see, these are the green roofs on the facilities we're going to be building on this first expansion. And those facilities are shown as such. Because of budgetary reasons, these whited out areas I'm pointing to here and this white area were delayed till we get to phase 3 of the liquid expansion.
Are the green roofs really green roofs?
They're going to be green roofs.
Okay.
They are really
Not
green
just paint.
not just
Okay.
give you names of operators that are going to complain about that. So, if you don't mind, I'll give you a real quick run through on how the facility is going to work. We're going to be pulling primary effluent off the clarifiers. It will be then pumped over to a fine screens building. That flow will then go through some 2mm fine screens, pass through a pipe underground where it gets to the head aeration basin through here. This is where our aerobic activity occurs. It then goes into a mixed liquor channel into this membrane building. From the membrane building, it comes, which they call the effluent treated now. This is the reusable effluent. It is now transferred over to a UV disinfection building and discharged out to the effluent outflow line. So what we're seeing here is a chemical handling building. This is the UV building, ultraviolet, which is fine screen building. This area here is going to be a future blower building that, for budgetary reasons, we can't build today. This is the odorless air scrubber. This is the electrical building that serves the electrical needs of the membrane building. This is where we're at with the construction today. As you can see, all those facilities are now, all the concrete work is completed. We started doing the mechanical work. We're approximately 55 to 60% complete with this project. We're looking at doing a clean water startup around November. If they pass all those tests, we'll be treating sewage by January. The original plant, this was built back in, I believe, 84, 85. FEMA had designated this area a floodplain, and the floodplain was at an elevation of 45. We built the admin building, first floor elevation 46, and in 1996 we had 6 inches of water. So we no longer believe the FEMA floodplain. So
we don't need it.
So this project, this first phase, includes raising the grade to elevation 49.5 on the existing new expansion facility with first floor and electrical at elevation 50. This is down here, Agnes Road, as part of our green concept. Not only are the roofs all green, there's a series of pervious asphalt going through here with underground rock, a series of biofilters coming back, and back in here we have a retention pond that will detain a 10-year, 24-hour storm. The NPDES permit right now, we maintain. We have a discharge right to the Clackamas River. We feel this design we have will probably far exceed the 10-year, 24-hour storm with all the biofilm soils and infiltration rock we have. We're including out here on Agnes the request for Green Street. We have designed bioswales with underdrain rock, plantings, trees, and screens from the building, as well as you see over here these cottonwoods here about 40, 50 feet high, screen us from the highway. This is a picture of the fine screen building. Again, this is going to be another green roof. The skylights here, every building is, we tried to grab as much skylight or natural lighting as we possibly could. These are the fine screens that I mentioned earlier, coming from the primary effluent, going through these 2mm fine screens and then passed over to the aeration basins. These are actual pictures as of March 15th. This is the aeration basin I was showing you at a distance. Just trying to give you a little bit better view of what this is. These are about 25, 30 feet deep. The influent coming from the fine screens enter into a splitter box, go through a mixed aeration channel basin, go through an anoxic zone, come back into this building, which is called the mixed liquor channel. That is the membrane building. Part of the criteria we had was to make sure we're not an offensive neighbor, because we do have the code coming in. So this design included these penthouses is where all the HVAC equipment is going to be stored. Again, another green roof, another series of skylights. The way the green roof works, this roof is very slow. You can feel it when you walk on it. So we're going to have seedings up here, stormwater, filtration, comes down to a membrane, goes out to these scuppers here, goes down into a collection rock, under rock on this pervious maintenance road that extends from Agnes all the way back to the west side of the plant. I mentioned earlier we're doing a membrane bioreactor, and What this does is that a series of cassettes, we built this membrane building with 8 channels. We're going to be utilizing the first 4 channels on phase 1. Phase 2 of the liquid expansion would then utilize the second 4 channels. I put this in just in case you've never heard of a membrane bioreactor, but what it does is basically it's millions of these carbon straws with perforations smaller than 10 times the size of a hair. And what they do is they put a vacuum on this cassette. The mixed liquor that's coming out of the aeration basin that enters into the mixed liquor channel comes through this series of these cassettes where water is drawn through by vacuum, all the solids are maintained on the outside. The treatment is so well that right now the coliforms and the bacteria they test for in the conventional system are undetectable from what I'm hearing from DEQ through this system. The permeate then goes out of the membrane building and comes into what I showed you earlier as the UV building, and this is where the light bulbs basically are given a final disinfection. In clean water, they require 30 millijoules per centimeter squared. Many people tell us that this is not even necessary, but DEQ is asking us to at least dose with 10, so UV is in place for that reason. It then goes, that permeate and future reuse water then goes into this channel where it goes over a weir and mixes with the effluent coming out of the conventional system. That reason being is they have a single point of monitoring. So when you're mixing your effluent from the membrane and mixing your effluent from the CAS system, and that all combining and going to the Willamette River, DEQ wants to see a single point of monitoring of what that combined is. So we designed this, so as long as this is mixing, there's a single point of monitoring if or when the reuse program ever got going. We could isolate that mixture, open these gates, and dedicate that to an isolated pipeline for wherever that may go. This is the storage handling building. This building is going to house hypochlorite and citric acid that is used for what they call backpulsing the membranes. About every 3 hours, they backpulse with this, forcing the hypochlorite with air back through the cassettes, and that knocks all the solids that might be hanging on the carbon fibers. This is the constructed interior to date. These are housekeeping pads for the hypochlorite and citric acid, and these are spill containment areas you see on the lower floors. Standby power generation. As I pointed out earlier, our plan on the first phase was to build a standby power building and install 2.5 megawatt generators. We decided to go with a single 2.5 megawatt generator and put it in an outside trailer right now to serve the needs until we get to phase 3 of the liquid expansion. We entered into an agreement with PGE to where we entered the dispatchable power program, where they assisted with the purchase of the generator, and they will maintain the generator and provide all the fuel for it for a 10-year period, providing we allow them, if they need to put power back in the grid, to operate that up to 400 hours a year, if we don't need it. So that was a kind of a coup, a very good program.
Some funding back for that.
Yeah. They help pay for that.
They'll pay for it.
How much? I'm sorry?
How much?
They contributed $527,000 for the generator, and they will pay for all the maintenance for a 10-year period. So the second phase of the expansion drives us into the solids expansion, where we're going to need 2 more digesters, solids handling building, centrifuges, and enclosed load-out facility. On the phase 2 solids is when we're going to have to install the standby power building. We're going to need the additional power to run the centrifuges for the solids as well as maintain the rest of the plant. Phase 3 of the liquid expansion is filling up those 4 empty basins that we have in the MDS building today with cassettes. At that time, we'd go back and build the blower building, and we'd add another aeration basin and a vortex script chamber. When we eliminated this, right now you need 2 blowers to feed the air needs of the aeration basin for the membrane. The blowers in the existing plant are 24 years old, pretty antiquated. They were up for getting targeted for replacement, so part of this project, we're replacing We're putting 5 high-speed, efficient turbine blowers in this blower building. 2 of those blowers are dedicated to the MDR. 3 of those blowers are dedicated to the conventional activation system. When this blower building gets filled, these 2 blowers then get moved over to that blower building, and that blower building then allows you to expand for this phase as well as future phases for liquid expansion. On the liquid expansion, I talked earlier about the 72-inch effluent and outflow line with a 75 MTU carrying capacity. The conventional system was using 68 million gallons of that capacity. The first phase took another 4, which put it at 72. This phase is going to put it at over 76. At this time, we're going to have to install a new effluent outflow line. Our proposal at the time we laid out the design is to go through this area here, which is now the landfill garbage removal site, to bring this over and down and out to Main Street, where it will tie into that 100 million gallon a day trunk line. Phase 4 is again the third liquid expansion, where again we're adding more aeration basins. We're now extending the membrane building out to put 4 more in, and at that time, when we do the third liquid expansion, we're going to have to go out to Main and replace or upsize that trunk line going to the Willamette River that has a carrying capacity of 100 million gallons a day. This time, before we go to phase 5, we're going to have to now get into the Rossman landfill. Our plan has always been to take area A, which is the extent of the area of that landfill we're going to need for the build-out expansion. Strip the dirt off the top of this, all the overburden, take all the garbage out of this, spread it over the remaining land, put the membrane over, fill area A back up with structural fill, and create our green space, open space on area B1 and B2.
So the garbage won't be trucked out somewhere else.
The only thing that will be trucked out is if we find any hot load, anything that's hot or considered contamination, then we have to haul that out. We've researched that. We don't believe there's anything other than municipal waste in there, but if we find anything, we will be required to haul that out.
Commissioner West has a question as well.
And this was thought I was hearing things when you just said that about spreading the garbage out. So what are
Well, on this site, you have.
What are the things that you wouldn't be spreading out? You said just municipal
If we
garbage.
found, right, if we found any kind of contaminated liquids, hydrocarbon, or not hydrocarbons, but any kind of PCBs, anything like that, anything that's determined hazardous like that, once you've exposed it, usually you have to eliminate that.
And what's your timeline on trying to do all of that?
Trying to do what?
With this, when you're going to start digging up all the garbage.
Again, it depends on how fast things develop. I mean, when this plan
growth in the community and how that.
Yeah, when this plan was put together, they were seeing about 1,000 to 1,200 EDUs a year. That's how the whole program was set up for phasing out to 2050. We're now seeing about 300 to 350 a year. So it depends on how fast growth occurs is going to determine how fast we got to go to these other phases.
So digging up this garbage could not take place for 20 years, 25 years. Okay. I guess what I would raise as an issue then, because I think the timeline for that is quicker, is the fact that in the current plan for the Cove project, my recollection is there was a plan to extend parking into the area where the old Rossman landfill is, beyond where the Traction Railroad right-of-way was, and there was some negotiations going on with Tri-Cities about a land swap of some sort. But my recollection of the sketch of that parking lot to serve the condos and the office tower along Clackamas Cove was going to be right about where you're talking about spreading all that garbage. And I'm just wondering if y'all are coordinating with the developers of the Cove on what their designs are for that.
I am going to comment on the coordination with the development. We're actually discussing those very items.
Okay.
And I'm not a part of that discussion, but I know that discussion is going on.
We've just begun those discussions, and we'll be proceeding with those now. So.
Before phase 5 can occur, we have to clear out the area in area A and make that structural fill so we can expand on it. Phase 5 of the expansion is a combination of liquid and solids expansion. This time we're going to have to add more digesters, which puts us on the footprint of the existing administration building we have at the plant, which is then going to be the time we will extend Agnes Road around to this parking area, add new, and of course we've already taken garbage out of here, add new laboratories, operations, field ops. These people are going to be displaced because of the solid expansion of that area. And this is kind of the concept plan once we get to phase 5. This is the interpretation center here. These are the bioswales going into retention. This is the Green Street on Agnes.
Is this which phase? Oh, phase 5?
This is phase 5 concept plan.
So the interpretation center in Green Street doesn't happen again for?
Green Street on Agnes along here is happening during this first phase.
That's phase 1.
Right. The bioswales kind of coming through this area until we expand. They will be put in. The retention pond is put in. The green roofs are all in on this first phase. And as we continue around with other phases, the green concept will continue.
So what's phase 5 specifically then?
Okay.
What's added on in phase 5 besides moving into
phase
the
5 is more digesters.
The administration building?
Yeah, the administration building, the laboratory, field operations.
And cleaning of the landfill.
Okay.
And cleaning of the landfill, I wrote down phase 5?
Yeah,
Okay.
phase 5. Before phase 5, we have to do something with the landfill.
Okay.
Move that garbage at that time.
Okay.
And we do use trees to cover some of the buildings that like this. So I'm hearing in the historic review board been there.
So after phase 5, then it's just a continuation of more liquids and solids expansion, more digesters, more membranes, more aeration bases. Then at build out, that takes us to year 2050 as originally planned. I was also asked to talk a little about what I know about coordination with the co-development. Some of the issues you brought up, I know they're discussing right now. I know staff's working with the developer, I think with the city. They're talking about some of those issues as far as Agnes Road extension, outfall easements, parking lot issues that the Cove has requested. How's that all going to get coordinated? I was asked who is heading that up. I was told Oregon City is going to take the lead on amending the conditional use permit, which right now the conditional use permit requires the open space, and we do have a criteria for balance cut and fill, and that Rossman landfill is all part of that, meeting the core requirement because we are in a floodplain, so we do have to make sure we don't lose that ability to do our balance cut and fill. That's part of our permit that we have to meet. I was also told that the Tri-City Advisory Committee has been informed of this discussion, and they've expressed no concerns that we know of today. So with that, I can...
I think we have a new member of the Tri-State Advisory Committee that hasn't yet met. So.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
I am new, and my name's David Frazier. I'm the new city manager. I haven't met my colleagues on that advisory board, but I don't know very much about this project because this is day 11, I think, for me. But yes, with that caveat, I would like to ask the wording of that first sentence about settling exchanges for a parking lot. Is my understanding isn't that all these things are supposed to be sort of negotiated along the way as a quid pro quo of exchange. I understand there were some commitments made, and I'm not sure because I wasn't here what those were, but am I to think then that we're supposed to sort of horse trade our way through the various things that everyone needs, or have some of those commitments already been made, or do you folks know?
Well, we're just at the beginning of those discussions, Mr. Frazier. It's nice to meet you. And you'll be joining us at our next Tri-City Advisory Committee meeting and get up to speed on some of these issues there too. But we're just beginning the discussions around these, and yeah, there may be some horse trading around those things. The district certainly has some interest, as does the city, and the district is definitely looking forward to continuing the policy of being a good neighbor to the city and doing what's necessary to keep the treatment facilities in as a good neighbor. So yeah, we're just at the beginning of that. These are some pretty long-term decisions with some pretty serious money associated with them. So we just need to work through exactly how these things are going to work out. So.
Well, the reason I asked that question in part is my experience in other communities with developments of this magnitude regarding, and I'm talking about the Cove, they generally don't leave things like parking lots to be leveraged for or against with other agencies when they're planning it. They usually sort of lock those things in before they do their budgets, their construction budgets, and move forward. So that was one that just surprised me. If that is in fact one of those things that's supposed to be traded, that would be unusual, I think, in my experience. But that might be the case. I just don't.
Again, I don't know if it's that's being traded. We're just beginning again to figure out what the issues are and how we can come to a best solution for everyone involved.
I wonder if I might jump in on the same kind of theme and ask ask Nancy to describe what's the outstanding issues. As I know, as you gave me a briefing, we had a few of them that were still needing resolution.
Well, definitely the parking lot and its the lease, the 98-year lease for the parking lot needs to be resolved. I think that regarding Agnes, which is up there, there's actually kind of two issues there. One is the part of Agnes that's in front of their phase one, and then there's the extension of Agnes over to the Cove, which is shown in the third street. There seems to be a bit of confusion at this point whether or not that's to be a public street or not. And our discussion from the condition of this format and the plan review is accessible to the public, particularly in this case by some cost, because we have an agreement to vote out to put a gate in for regular motorized traffic at one time. Motorized traffic we want to do emergency involved.
Nancy, if I may, would that extension of Agnes to the Cove be constructed on top of the garbage in the landfill?
Well, right now it's showing a phase five, which could be in years depending on the so it might be a while.
May or may not.
And Agnes is a collector currently.
There's also questions at this point about whether or not the Agnes would have right of way or be an easement. But the question of the timing on the landfill remediation is somewhat of a concern in terms of the parking lot that you just mentioned, Commissioner, and also relative to Agnes. Extension. I think at this point we're also there's some questions about what is the landscaping plan going to be in the interim completion of phase one. If the phase five includes the administration building, what's that lot going to look like in the short term between the future code development and the plan? And the question about outfall easement, the city will need to know kind of route the district wants to take to that, so we can determine where we can allow such that kind of type to be, and how we're going to impact a new roadway, such as that, and certainly the new roundabout that will be constructed. Otherwise, if there would have to be some sort of agreement if there's a road there, what kind of reconstruction there's some still discussion about the aesthetic. My understanding when we were back in the planning days of the plan expansion, and the mayor is correct, we've always been very supportive of even being a little aggressive in saying this should be a regional plan to some things from a staff perspective. But we want to make sure that it is indeed an amenity for Oregon City. This is a public waterfront, and we are very concerned about the buffering on the outside of the plant to pick that the interface between people that are entering into Oregon City or enjoying Oregon City in the long run and things. And then there's also the question of the land use modification. And this is something that I think that is correct we just started talking about there's a desire to rezone the parking lot area to mixed use because that is the land, the zoning in that area, in the regional center, mixed use downtown, and we're not certain if the district will agree to that, okay, well, it is industrial, and questions arise about.
The district, you mean Tri-Cities district?
Yeah. And
So
questions arise about what would it be used for in the future.
they own the old Rossman landfill, and you're saying that the zoning for that property is currently MUD?
No, it's industrial.
Currently is industrial, okay. And the discussion is to change that to some kind of mixed use zoning? Okay.
So I think then there's also a number of other details that we probably don't need to go into tonight, but the most important thing is that there are some future discussions and this is an agreement that will be needed to take to the city commission, and there's a bit of time of the essence here because, as you know, the code is trying to move forward. I know the economy is helping everybody, including the ground, he's got a development plan for it. But still, we don't want any agreement to slow up the development that could occur in a timely manner. So we're really hoping that there will be some, both agencies will prioritize in coming to an agreement on this issue. We're bringing something to the draft of recommendation.
I think that's a fairly good summary of most all the issues that are out there that need to be talked about. As you can tell, they are fairly significant and do warrant some action.
Yes, I'd like to kind of go through the list of things that have been very important to us. So, would you say, Paul, that this is a state-of-the-art plant on the smallest possible footprint?
I would say that, yes.
Okay. Is it going to be as green and sustainable as humanly possible?
Say yes.
Is that qualified because of funding, or is it?
No, actually, we kind of created the Green Street. We didn't know if Oregon City had. I don't think Oregon City does have a Green Street. So we were kind of left with our creative juices to develop what a Green Street looks like. We've done that. We've tried to meet the sustainability and green criteria throughout the flow of the plant. The infiltration into storage rock, the pervious asphalt, the green roofs, and the various bioswales. I think we've hit our mark.
Okay, good. Actually, we do have like the two Green Streets. We have the one up on Blue Creek Road. Some little places, yeah. Okay, then one of the other questions is the design of the facilities. So, what will someone see when they're nearby?
As far as coming down the highway or from the
I mean, will it look just like an industrial wastewater plant that you see everywhere, or will there be something distinctive about its design or its compatibility with neighbors and with Oregon City? I know that we spent a lot of time in the sounding board talking about that.
I think we tried to hit that. I mean, with the architectural features on the outside of these buildings, to me, it's way beyond what a industrial facility would look like. May not be the artist you want to talk to as far as what's pretty.
He is an engineer, so I call him.
Yes, okay. Let some of this go on now. See, I'm not going to have my finger on here. Let's see who's up. Commissioner Neely, it is you.
Long ago, I served on a committee that when Tri-Cities was talking about providing services to our client facility and what might happen there. One of the things they talked about was actually having the ability for the public to come through the facility, witness it from trails and so forth. You didn't comment on that. I was wondering if that's still
the plan. This is basically on this first page we put that in. The tour starts here and goes through the chemical building, the UV building, continues on through here to identify the fine screening building. The route then comes through this way here and goes into the membrane building, shows this is an operation office here, shows how the operators are working, tours through how the membrane plant works, what that does, and background. So that is designed on this first phase.
What about a community meeting room? I know we talked about that. Is that in the
These buildings do not have a community meeting building. This one would in the future. So that's in a phase, but it's not in this first phase.
We still are. I have several points. Well, I'm no longer green.
No,
Okay. Didn't talk much about cooling the water during the summer.
Cooling water?
That is in terms of return to the river. My understanding is
what temperature impacts are we going to have on it?
Yes, and how are you going to deal with it?
I couldn't tell you that. I'd have to get with the process guy on what that issue really was.
I'm going to make a bit of a suggestion.
Okay.
And that suggestion is this, and it comes into the reuse of water that we've talked about, one thing that we're interested in. I think there are areas in the Cove area, the Tri-City area, that we can use for stormwater detention. We talked about detention facilities, but I'd like to see some retention capabilities too, and whether we could reuse some of that water to actually have some permanent wetlands in the area, water that's not going to go back to the river, it's going to be retained in the system. And that would leave you less of a volume of water that you would need to cool. And I'd like you to actually think about that. In terms of the solids, I believe there was a small facility in the Tri-City, or current Tri-Cities facility that at least used to function in terms of methane production to provide some electricity. Are you going to have any of these solid use used for?
I think they're looking at that when they do the solid phase expansion. They're going to be looking at recapturing methane and try to do something like that as part of the sustainability effort.
Phase 2 work, which will follow on the heels of this effort. Right.
The other question is on the membrane technology. To what degree can these membranes act as fillers? What I'm thinking about is, and I don't know what load you take out in terms of phosphate, or whether much phosphate comes out of it, but in terms of molecules down to that level, can they be removed in the membrane capabilities?
It takes out almost all the bacteria. I think there's some viruses that it doesn't take out, but to get you specific numbers for
But
that.
it's all molecules it will not take out.
There's some that it will not take out.
Okay.
And I can't tell you how small that gets down to, but I know some viruses you're going to have.
So viruses can get through, the molecules can
Right.
get through, okay. I think those were my comments.
Commissioner Nocita?
I have a question about the membrane technology and level of purity of the effluent that you'll be discharging. And I hear it's quite clean and very effective, and I'm just wondering, is it effective enough that you would hypothetically be able to have an NPDES permit without a toxic mixing zone in the permit?
I think that's a very good possibility. I'm not a permit writer or a process guy, but right now, as DEQ is telling us, that it's so clean that the things they typically have us measured for are not detectable. So now they're going to have to start developing other things we would need to measure. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that report. It will be ongoing because we have ongoing issues, so
In closing, this has been a kind of a fast-track project. It's been a lot of detail, a lot of facilities that had to be reviewed, and I want to compliment your staff on working with us to get through this process. They've been expedited, and they've worked with us very well, and I appreciate that and want to thank them for it.
thank you very much.
Oh, very much.
Okay, next is, I think there's someone in the back that's been waiting a really long time. That would be Suffolk Water Board Manager John Collins, and here to talk about something we've talked about for one other meeting? 2 other meetings. Thank you. And that is a loan that Suffolk needs, and tonight. We're here to with an action item, so hopefully we'll resolve that. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Don.
I guess I'll start with a brief recap. We met in the first part of March, and myself, along with the consultant Randy Goff from HDR, presented a presentation to the board explaining that we have some bond covenants issues and what the financial ramifications and what the rate structures may be for us to be in compliance with our bond covenants. At that time, when we identified the problem, I had an idea that possibly it may be beneficial for Southwark to borrow $2.4 million from either the City of Oregon City or the City of Westland, or combination of, to pay off our bonds, thus eliminating the bond covenances and avoiding a large interest rate, or wholesale rate increase of excess of 25%. Since that time, we came back with a work session. As you can remember, I believe it was the April 13th, Tuesday, April 13th, excuse me. And at that time, Westland said that they would like to be able to help, but demonstrated or explain that they were financially unable to participate in this program. So that brings us back tonight for an action item. I've read your staff report. Southworks asked for a loan for 2.5%. I can see that there's an option B for approximately what would be 4.6382%, which would be a break-even point for Southworks. I'd like the commission to possibly consider an interest rate of 3.5%, and that 3.5% allows Oregon City to receive a pretty good rate of return, approximately 7 times what the present face value is. Also allows the Southwark Water Board to save a portion of the money, and I think that for me, I'm considering this as my job is to manage your resource in producing drinking water and fiscally manage the treatment facility, and also that when you look at rate impacts, we're in a time right now, it's pretty tough for all utilities. I talked to Randy Goff, and we're one of several utilities facing these challenges, and every expense or every savings that we can capture at Southwark is a net savings for what our rates are going to be to your water funds, because essentially we pay for the operations, the materials and services, basic contingencies, and we charge you what it costs to produce drinking water. So if we're able to capture some savings, it will be reflected in potential rates or a decrease or at least a stable rate going forward. And I would ask you to consider letting us save a little money in this process and try to manage your rates. Thank you.
So the terms would remain the same, 7 years?
Correct.
Still. Okay. Questions then of Mr. Collins?
I'll have questions. I want to get a presentation from Mr. Wimmer.
Did you have questions for him?
No, after the presentation, I'll have questions.
He
After
didn't
Mr. Wimmer.
have a presentation.
Well, he has some items here in the agenda packet, and I just wanted to see if he could walk us through them, because I do have some questions about.
These are the 2.5% you've seen several times before, which in the middle there, it saves, it would give Oregon City $233,000.
Wait, which?
This is the option A on page 2. The third page you've seen several times before. It's been around for a couple months. We added the option B, which I computed what the actual rate of the bonds were, which turned out to be 4.6382% over the life of the existing bonds, and when we applied that to our loan, it came out about break even. So at that rate, Oregon City would receive like $433,000, which is almost twice as much as they would have received. Southwark savings would go down from $215,000 down to about $15,000. So.
But they'd still wind up with a net positive.
There's going to be some costs that are going to be incurred because you have to have an expert to compute how much has to be put away for the defeased bonds, and we'll have to have the IGA reviewed by the attorney, and a separate trust will have to be set up probably with Wells Fargo to do the defeasance, so it would probably be around 10 to 15,000, so they would be about zero.
Can we project this information up so the audience can see it?
It's in the packet. So have you calculated what, 3.5%?
Yeah, 3.5 would give Oregon City 327,000 interest, and the Southport savings would be 122,000. So it's sort of
Say that one again, I missed it.
122,000 would be the net savings for Southport, and Oregon City would get 327,000 versus 233 under option A, which would be 2.5%, or 433 at 4.6%.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commissioners?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doug.
Actually, if we've got public comment, I think I'll wait for mine.
All right, for public comment.
I'll wait for public comment. I see we've got a few people from the audience.
We do. Okay, I'm waiting for Nancy to bring that up. Why don't we go ahead with public comment then while you're working on that? You guys would relinquish your seats and we can go ahead. If you would come up together while expedite since the hour is late. Patricia Holloway and William Gifford, followed by William, since Nancy's there. Okay, thank you. William Gifford.
Mayor and City Councils. My name is William Gifford and I reside in Oregon City. And I have 2 points that I want to, well, I get a question, an observation. The observation to me is the whole concept of a loan seems like such a brilliant idea to me. I mean, to get the situation, it's favorable to both parties. And yet the fact of the matter is we are both parties. I mean, we're the city and we're Southport. And
half a party.
Yeah, what kind of party is that? And the concept of negotiating the interest rate seemed to me like a pretty good idea at the beginning, to just split the difference, because it's, no matter which way we do it, if we split the other way and we go up over 4%, well, I mean, it's a little cash advantage to the city, but not so much to the water board. And the other way around, we could go less too. But it seemed to me as though the reasonable thing to do is, wisdom of Solomon, cut the baby in half and go for the midpoint there, and that way.
That wasn't Solomon you were trying to get.
No, I So that's my first point, that I think that might be a bit much to do about nothing. Secondly, is that the concept of the profit that we're going to be making, the city. Now, let me just put on from the city's perspective, is we're going to be hauling close to $250,000, and I have not heard any discussion, and even at the budget meetings on Monday night, I didn't hear any discussion as to what are we going to do with that money. And do we want to earmark it? Does go into the general fund to, make us look good? Or do we have any plans? What are we, I just haven't heard any real discussion about what are we going to do with that money.
One of your commissioners has a proposal.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I think it's been thought about.
Good, I just haven't heard those thoughts.
We haven't voiced it. Yeah, we're on the details. Okay, next speaker, Ken McKehoe.
So I'm Commissioner Kehoe with the Clackamas River Water District, and I submitted a document on behalf of CRW as one of the representatives of CRW that's been speaking with South Fork Water Board. And are you able to pull that document up, or is that on here? It's not on there, but you did submit it to the commissioners. Okay, so it's part of the record?
It's in front of us.
It's in front of us. However, we did not. It's not been available to the public. It has not been reviewed by South Fork Water Board, and
I'm submitting it as part of part of the record. So I submitted it earlier today to be part of the record. Okay. And in that letter, it describes a possible loan by CRW to the South Fork Water Board at a lower interest rate than what Oregon City has offered. So I think that might need to be reviewed. The other thing is that I was looking at the loan amounts compared to the principal with option A and option B, and my understanding was when I went to the first informational session made by South Fork Water Board when they first requested a loan, that the loan amount of $2.4 million was going to be used to pay off the bond debt. And looking at this spreadsheet, option A and B, it looks like that there's a 2.4 loan on top of the 2.855, or $2,855,000. So I guess I was a little confused as to if that loan was paying off all of the bond debt or if it's just a partial payment on the bond debt, if there was more than one lien. Because when I was looking at the commission report by David Wimmer, it said that the $2.4 million was to defease the Series 1998 and Series 2004 revenue bonds, and I wasn't quite certain what defease meant, if that meant to pay it all off or just to refinance a portion of the bond.
Maybe John will come up and back.
Mayor, would you like me to answer that
Yes.
question? The $2.4 million is the amount of money needed to pay off the bond. The additional money, South Fork already has in a bond reserve that's required by our covenants. So we have several covenants requirements. So inclusive payout.
Okay, thank you. And I think you want to define defease.
But defease means that the bond's not callable. I mean, if you own a bond, we can't just cash you out. You have to get the interest that you thought you were going to get for the life of the bond. So what we have to do, we have to put enough money in a trust so that there's money to cover your bond when it comes through. And there's only, it's a 2004 bond, but it has about three payments left, correct? So we'd be putting $98,000 roughly for interest into that trust plus the principal. And if you look on the second page of this, I'll show you we're paying off $2.85 million in principal, and we're paying bondholders, and we're putting some into the trust, and we have the $98,000, so we're actually having to put in $2,418,000 is what it's going to cost us because we have $500,000 in the reserve which we could apply. So that's why we're loaning $2.4 million, and we're going to be paying out a net of $2.418 million. So
which one of these charts are you looking at, Mr. Warner?
this one, you've seen it, I've handed out many times over the last few weeks.
Second one.
It's on the second page of right in the center there. It shows what happens. We're paying $2,855 out plus interest and applying.
Do the bond versus no bond document?
What's the one that says under page?
It's the middle one.
Second page on yours. Back there.
It says OC loan setting was at 2.5.
OC loan 7 years at 2.5,
Yes.
and then above that status quo.
And then
Well, it's not as paying the bonds as they come through. We pay out $2.8 million net over the life of the bonds, and then in the middle column there it shows at 2.5% that when we're paying off all the bonds, and you come down to the blue number, South Park would be paying out $2.6 million after paying back Oregon City and 233 interest, so they would be $215,000 ahead. On the bottom, it shows for the effect on Oregon City, we would be giving up $91,000 at the 0.5% to loan to South Fork, and when you go over the middle, you're receiving $233,000, and on the money you're getting back, you're reinvesting that and earning $39,000. So earning 273. So on the far right, Oregon City is a net ahead by 181,000. The total savings to the two organizations is about 400,000.
Yeah, I want to compliment both of you on working to provide a solution here that benefits both communities. I think that's pretty amazing. Commissioner Neely.
I was going to, I guess my comment, a couple of it. In terms of how the interest would be used, I think it's partially, for my part, depends on what sources they come from. I believe that Mr. Wormer had indicated to me earlier this week that we are actually paying out on some of the PERS money. Is that correct?
Bond?
No. The current PERS account, we're actually taking money out of it to meet some PERS obligations. Is that correct?
Yes, we're putting money into it, but right now we're putting more in than we're taking out because we have a stable rate internally, but the PERS rate that's being charged by the organization is less. So,
my
2011-12, when things pick up,
yes, so we might see a shift. And I would say, to any extent that we take money out of PERS, I would like to see the interest return to PERS because of the uncertainty involved with that particular account. If, in fact, some or most or all the money can come from other reserve accounts, then I would like to see us have a discussion on how those interest rates may be used. I personally feel that some of the interest should go back into the reserve accounts that they're taken from, but I think part of that interest should be used for other purposes. I don't know if that's a necessary discussion for here, though. I think that's a question that we can have afterwards in terms of how those funds should be used.
Yeah, and especially in the lateness of the hour, we could hold that
And
over. I think it's important.
So, I just want to make that statement. For one thing, Mr. Gifford had brought that particular issue up, and I think it is something that we would want to address. But the question is whether we're going to make the loan or not. Right. We can make decisions of what accounts they come out of and how the interest is going to be distributed at a different date.
Right. Okay, are there any more questions on the giving of the loan? And if not, then I would entertain a motion.
It is late, but I don't want to follow ahead on this.
More questions?
Yeah, because I do appreciate what we got from Clackamas River Water here. A couple of reactions that I had to this document was...
May I interrupt just 1 second? Is this, I wanted to ask, is this an attorney-client privilege document, or should it be made public?
In speaking with our attorney, this document is public because it's been presented, but Southport's position on things that are being negotiated right now with the Clackamas River Water District, we're not able to say or talk about it publicly. We're in a confidentiality agreement that we signed with CRW. I'm pretty sure our attorneys facilitated that. That's what I was reminded of by our attorney today. And I'm not able to answer questions about a pending negotiation. As long as you understand that, I'll help you any way I can.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Sita.
Okay. Some of these documents are just public records that anybody could get through a Public Records Act request. Some of the attachments are standard IGAs. Some of the information was new to me, and I'm very interested in having gotten them. For example, we have an intergovernmental cooperative agreement for construction of a water transmission line that was signed by former Mayor Williams back, I guess, the turn of the last decade, about 2000. And I'm assuming this is still a pending operative agreement that we abide by, that Southport abides by. Correct. One thing I learned that I didn't know is that I've always heard that Southport's water supplies go to Oregon City and Westland and CRW South, the former Claremont area. Here I learned for the first time of another agreement between South Fork and the North Clackamas County Water Commission dated February 29th, 2000. Do we actually sell water to NCCWC?
We have in the past, yes.
Are we selling water now to NCCWC?
I don't have the records with me, but it's been some time. Any considerable amount of water has been over 4 years. There has been exchanges of water. For instance, South Fork purchased water last year when we put our new clear well online. We purchased approximately, and I'm estimating the numbers, about $60,000 worth of water, and we're out of service for about 3 to 4 weeks at that time. But on a contractual basis, North Clackamas County Water Commission built membrane filtration and no longer has a need for winter water sales from us. So we are, to some degree, we're emergency intertie now.
And the way this water wheeling provision reads is that theoretically, water could go from South Fork to a number of different agencies for sale beyond the aforementioned under South Fork.
Going from memory, you have the document in front of you. I don't. I think if you're referring to the one where it says South Fork shall supply all water to Oregon City, South Fork shall supply all water to Westland, and South Fork shall supply all water up to 2 MGD average to Clackamas River water south unless otherwise agreed upon. Is that the document you're referring to?
Yeah. But if we sell water to the North Clackamas County Water Commission, it seems that they in turn could sell that same water to Oak Lodge and other agencies.
They're owned by those agencies, so I'm not. I understand what our commitment is and what our responsibilities are and what our contract and protection was for investing money into that project.
Have we been approached recently by NCCWC to sell them water? And here's where I'm going with this. One of the things that I had mentioned in the past couple of meetings was that I felt that this loan, my preference is not to consider this loan in a vacuum, that there are bigger issues going on with South Fork, not only the litigation with CRW, the litigation with Water Watch, and these documents mention cooperating on water sales and water rights and not having to use all the water rights if cooperation is made on water sales. And we have CRW offering South Fork a loan that is competitive with ours. So,
may I add to that? Sure. That is an offer that's on paper, but it has conditions to it. I can't speak of the specific conditions, but I think that's something that the board has to review and consider. And we've just received this conditions.
No, I'm not arguing with it. Okay. But what I was pointing out last time was that when you have a policy problem like this, you have a universe of potential solutions. People are coming forth with ideas, from unexpected places. That if you broaden the discussion to include parties, someone might have an idea that none of us have thought of, and that making this loan, might not be the only solution. And that if we broaden the discussion, new solutions might emerge. I didn't get a very positive reaction to that idea when I first expressed it. But it's interesting to me to see that something as complex as this makes me wonder if, through a combination of sales to different parties, cooperation on water rights, that this issue of the shortfall of South Fork water could be solved, maybe even without needing this loan, through additional water sales, if someone like North Clackamas County Water Commission is interested in doing that. So
I can't speak for North Clackamas County Water Commission. I can tell you at the present time their treatment facility has an adequate amount of money, amount of resources to supply the water. They do have a minimum purchase contract with the Clackamas River Water District, but you put those two resources together and they are able to furnish their immediate needs. So looking at a contract to sell water to the North Clackamas County Water Commission at the present time is probably not on the horizon, just so you know. Going in.
Well, actually,
You can continue the discussion.
I'm sorry?
You want to continue the discussion after the motion? Or?
No, I have wanted to make one other point on this.
Okay.
It seems to me that that what is being presented by CRW is going to be a function. It's going to be a subject of consideration by South Fork Water Board after they go through this and see what it offers. I consider this kind of a competition to what I'm interested in as one commissioner in advancing as an idea for this, and I just want to put forth my view on this loan, and I think it differs somewhat from Commissioner Neely's position on it. So I'm not sure that the discussion on this is ready for a motion yet. When this idea was first presented to us, I was not really seeing a way I could support it. And I shared with our city manager that there was perhaps, and some of my colleagues, that there was one way that I thought that I could come around to support this, which is I was the one that requested that of the city manager and Mr. Wimmer. I'm very happy to have quick and timely response was to average out the current bond, outstanding bonds, showing the 4.6 interest rate. And I have an issue with having South Fork come to us in distress, somewhat, because they can't meet their bond covenants, and asking us not only to relieve them of that burden, but also cut them a deal on interest rates also. I just don't think that's appropriate as a matter of principle. I do find it enticing to make the loan so that instead of out-of-town Wall Street bondholders receiving the interest payments on these bonds, that the interest payments come to the City of Oregon City instead. So if we made the loan at the 4.6 rate, I think I could support it. If the interest rate payments, profit that we make out of it, were dedicated to a water-related purpose, because this is being made to a water-related agency for water-related purposes. And the language I used with the city manager was that we would dedicate the interest profit off this loan to water conservation, water quality, and water amenity development projects. And I concede to Commissioner Neely that any interest payments from the PERS fund should go back to the PERS fund. But my proposal would be to make the loan at the 4.6 rate with those conditions, that the interest rate on the PERS loan go back to PERS, but the interest rate being made from the general fund go to these water conservation and water quality and water amenity development projects. And I say that with the recent history we've had of having presentations on water conservation, having proposals like the Cove Habitat Task Force be raised and discussed as something of priority, but failing for lack of funding. And I think this loan provides us the opportunity to do that, those and other projects. So I would like to do that proposal up front. I don't think I would be interested in just making a loan and then having conversations later about where it's going to go.
Yes, David.
This thing is, I'm sorry, turned into, I don't know, call it a nightmare or whatever, but I wake up in the middle of the night thinking of new scenarios. Come in, I spend my first 2 or 3 hours a day making a new spreadsheet, so I get out of the day. But one of the thoughts that I had was actually similar to what Mr. Nishida is talking about, is with the loans very clear to me they come from the PERS bond and the general fund, that we could pay them whatever the government pool rate is and put the difference into the water fund, because they're the ones that are taking a hit on the rates. And we could adjust that as the government pool things. And another thing we talked about is the first 2.5 years of principals send it right straight back to the PERS bond, which is like $900,000, so it would be all paid within 2.5 years, and the other $1.5 million would go to the general fund in the last 4 years. If it could go faster if the revenues picked up. But
So
it seems like it makes both funds, the PERS fund and the general fund, the whole, they're earning what they would have made, and they're not making any more or any less. And then we pay the PERS bond back quickly and let the water fund have it because it's paying higher rates.
Commissioner Neely?
I'm opposed to the motion, but I expect discussion after the motion.
Sure.
I'm going to move to make the loan at 3.5%.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Okay, for discussion.
Let me just.
Like what?
Yeah, since I spoke to you.
Sure, lay out your.
First of all, I think everything that Commissioner Nocita has put forward we can discuss. But I think the need for the loan is there. We've got a situation where Oregon City benefits and where South Fork also benefits at a 3.5% rate. And I think that's really the issue we should address at this point. I'm completely open at another time to discuss how the loan interest rates are going to be distributed, and I think that's a topic unto itself. But I think there's a bit of an urgency here, and I think we need to proceed with this.
Okay, Commissioner Nocita?
I just wanted to get back to my question to Mr. Wimmer. Under the scenario you just mentioned, PERS being paid off first. So let's say the scenario I mentioned of using the interest payments off the general fund interest for water conservation projects, would that be deferred? We couldn't do that for 3 years under that scenario?
We can do anything we want. I'm just saying, the government, the funds are earning 1/2 of 1% right now. Let them have 1.5, and whatever the difference is, give it to the water fund. Like I said a few meetings ago, interest does not have to follow principal. Obviously, if we're going to give the heart of the watermelon to the water fund.
Smith?
I definitely agree with 3.5, and I do want to have a discussion about the interest, and I think that's an important one to have. I agree that any money taken out of PERS and actually, doing exactly what Commissioner Neely and Nocita were speaking about. But as for that, I don't really have any other problems. This has not been something that we haven't gone over a lot, and it is not been a hard decision for me to come to. There hasn't been a lot of concerns. In fact, the only concern that I have had is why isn't Westland helping? And that's been really the only concern that I've really heard from citizens or anybody. And I find it interesting that Oregon City is in a better situation than Westland, which I see in my lifetime. So I'm kind of excited about that point in itself. That was the one issue. We as a commission, I think Commissioner Neely was really asking the question, well, can we find out from Westland if that's true? And we got the answer again, but we really didn't get, I think, what we were looking for, which was some sort of proof that that was the case. And so we didn't get that answer. But I think that it's time to make a decision on this, and we can talk about the other details at another meeting.
I'd like to move to a decision as to, but I'd like to say that I really like the idea that Commissioner Nocita has of using it for water-related issues. I think that's a great idea. I don't know if all of it should go to them, but I'm really open to talking about that because I think this is an opportunity to match some funding with some other needs that we have in the community and matches some of our goals as well. So, like on that note, are you ready to vote? Okay, Nancy, vote please.
Commissioner Nocita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. Okay, back to the agenda. Like, we've got a lot left. I'm wondering if this leaves if you need to maybe on this one. Okay, this is the next item on the agenda is ordinance number 10-1004, which is a street vacation authorizing the westerly portion of Main Street south of Agnes to be vacated. So for the very quick and simple staff report, I will call on.
May I make a comment? I've never seen such confusing maps and layouts. I have no idea what this right of way is. And as you're making your presentation, whoever's making it, please tell me where we're talking about. I'm really confused. I know the general area, but.
Let's have an unconfusing staff report as we talk about the street vacation case. Who's doing this? Is this Ms. Freshour? Thank you.
We brought you a resolution proposing vacation in March, and this is the follow-up ordinance that basically we're asking for your approval to formally adopt this ordinance. Okay, I've had it where it is.
Is it working? Okay. I would say that, now I don't have page numbers like you do because I have the hard copy, but it would be back in, let's see.
Is the consent area map?
70 ordinance of authorizing the vacation of a westerly portion, consent area map, that's correct.
Okay, consent area map.
And what you're looking at here is, here's code. I'll wait for you to get there.
Don't you have a hard copy there?
Yeah, both.
Here, both.
Okay, so are we all on consent area
Yes.
map?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so we recognize the cove.
Yes.
South of the cove to the west is the Oregon City Shopping Center. Directly south of the cove is the old Glacier concrete plant.
Yep.
And I-205 is the long freeway looking markings on the map. And there's an arrow that points to a very thin, dark swath, and it's called vacate requested area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on Main Street. The east edge, or the west edge of Main Street would be added to the east edge of the old Glacier concrete plant parcel. And it is blown up on the previous document, which is Exhibit B, right-of-way vacation, so you can see the actual dimensions. Does that help you locate it, Commissioner?
A bit, but if you could indicate what's at the place we're vacating it, is it part of the paved area of Main Street, or is it in fact an area that extends into what we normally think is a glacier property?
It's on the edge of Main Street.
But we got a bike lane on Main Street. Does it go on the?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No, the right-of-way goes farther out.
It goes farther,
Yes.
and so we're not talking about vacating anything that's currently
No, we
within
would
that.
not want to get
Well,
rid
I
of
was
any
sure that
bike
was the
lanes.
case.
Right.
I wanted to make sure, I know we're gonna realign Main Street at one point, and I wanted to make sure that this doesn't affect the realignment. It also doesn't affect the current function.
No, it
Okay.
does not.
Okay, now, more staff report?
I have nothing more.
I'm happy.
Okay, is there a motion for adoption of this vacation?
I move for first reading of ordinance 10-1004, authorizing the vacation of the westerly portion of Main Street indicated on the map, located south of Agnes Avenue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. Is there further comments? Oh, yes. Would you please read? Reading, Mr. Advisement.
Ordinance number 10-1004, an ordinance vacating a section of Main Street, Clackamas County, City of Oregon, City of Oregon.
Thank you. Further comments? Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith? Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next, we have resolution 10-09, accepting jurisdictional transfer of a portion of Clackamas River Drive from Clackamas County. Nancy, I assume this is yours as well.
Yes, and what you'll find at your desks is a revised Exhibit A that the county provided us this afternoon that will actually be attached to our request to the county for this jurisdictional transfer. Are you finding it?
Yes.
Okay. What we've tried to do here is simplify some of the jurisdictional crossover in the jug handle project in intergovernmental agreements, and also recognize that this section of Clackamas River Drive is inside the UGB, and it is not. It's a benefit for us to actually take over jurisdiction of this section of Clackamas River Drive. First of all, because it covers where the new jug handle is going to be, and then second of all, it's served by the Park Place residents that come down off of Forsyth and Luray and Melinda. So we feel like it's okay. I recommend that we do take this over at this time. We did examine the pavement conditions out there before, and also the stormwater facilities. And we have asked Clackamas County to provide us all the as-built drawings for all the stormwater facilities out there. And they have recently cleaned them, and we feel like they're in good shape. We're going to review all that before with them too. We've had previous discussions with them over this, and they're amenable to providing us all the information we need on the stormwater system. The paving north of the future jug handle area is in good condition. The pavement in the area of the jug handle is in poor condition. All of that will be reconstructed with the jug handle project. And so for all those reasons, and also given the fact that Clackamas County is in most cases more than happy to transfer jurisdiction to relieve them of additional responsibility for another, I think this is 6,700 feet or so of roadway, and it's less than it. Anyway, that I think it's a win-win for both agencies. And so we're asking you to approve the resolution, and then their staff will take it to the county commission and get their concurrence.
May I have a motion, please? Commissioner West.
Good question.
What about a motion? Okay.
I would like to move for approval resolution number 10-09, accepting the jurisdictional transfer of Clackamas River Drive.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner West, second by Commissioner Smith. And now for the question, Commissioner Neely. I heard this here first.
Okay.
I was louder. You were louder.
Is it not true, Mrs. Rushhour, is it not true that we get money from the county?
In this case, we will not get money from the county. That's why we evaluated the pavement first. If the pavement is of substandard condition, we absolutely require either they pave it or we ask for money as per the urban growth management agreement with Clackamas County. But in this case, we examined the pavement. We feel like it's suitable for us to accept the road as is.
You want another examination?
Do I want another examination?
I'm going to get us some.
Oh, I think on this one, usually we drive a hard bargain. Normally, well, I won't go any further with that. But on this situation, I think it's fine. And, excuse me, the city recorder is reminding me that there was a change in the distance from 0.59 to. This is the new one. It's 0.59. It's just the old. Oh.
0.625, you mean?
Yes, it is 0.59 miles of roadway.
Not 0.625.
Yes, correct. Yes,
So-
I downloaded mine today and after we had made the correction, so.
So, will the motion maker and seconder please recognize that
Yes, so the correction is .5955.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
That's 59.
Seeing none, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next, we have the consent agenda. May I have a motion for adoption?
approval.
Thank you. Moved by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Smith on the consent agenda. Please, Nancy, vote.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next, we're into reports, and first will be our city manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to report to the commission that the City of Oregon City has its annual financial reports, and I'm going to present those to you. This is a result of our annual audit that's required by state law, and we have those here for you. There were two findings, two recommendations from the auditors. I'm happy to report that the Finance Department has addressed both of those, and we heard back from our auditors that we now have a clean report. I'm one of those managers who likes audits and likes to follow the recommendations.
Well, we appreciate that.
So, and judging from your financial condition, I would imagine the predecessor, Replus, is also of that mindset. So, the two findings were essentially that when we mutilated checks, we weren't doing enough to eradicate the signature blocks, so we've done that, and then we separated duties in the Finance Department in one other area. And so with that, I'll hand these out to you, and if you want more, if you have any questions after you look these over, please give me a call and I'll address those for you in more detail if you need. The second thing I want to mention is that I'm finishing up work on the urban renewal budget, which I actually worked on, I'm happy to say, during part of the land use discussion. So we're making progress every minute.
The ratio and discussion.
I probably picked up more than you might think, but anyway, I was multitasking. So then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have tomorrow is Bring Your Child to Work Day. And so if you see kids running around City Hall, you'll know what that's all about. And then lastly, if commissioners, I know that I'm sort of new and we're trying to get used to each other. If you have questions of the staff, if you make sure that, particularly, I don't mind if you, communicate directly with the department heads, but please go through me if you have that opportunity, because I'm giving them work at the same time. Everybody's got demands of them, and they're sort of accountable to me. So I want to understand what it is they're being tasked with and sort of be part of it so I can close that loop. So I appreciate your cooperation on that. And let's see here. I believe that's all I have.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple of very short things this evening. I just want to thank Nancy Ide, our city recorder, who put out this booklet, which is wonderful. It's available to the public, and it's a list of our goals and actions that we established this year. And it's the first time we've had a publication like this. We've had it on the wall, but I really appreciate that. And I've heard other citizens comment on that as well. Earth Day was a good turnout, got a lot of projects done. I guess it was as big a turnout as last year, but last year was the centennial, so it was a special year. I'm going to hold over the MPAC report, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee report, but we are working there on those qualities and reports that we need to determine when the urban growth boundary should be expanded. And there will be a lot of discussion about that. And some of that is, should the assumptions be reevaluated in the light of this recession? For instance, household size has increased, so doesn't that change how the population numbers might be reconfigured? So that's sort of the quality of the discussion. You'll get more on that later. Also, the climate change conference that Nancy and Doug and I attended is now on the Metro website. So if you'd like to see Dr. Muma's presentation, and I recommend it, you may go there. That's my report. Are there others who have reports this evening? Commissioner Nocita.
Two reports. One, I just want to report that I attended last week. I was invited to speak to the Holcomb Outlook CPO. They met up at the community center up on off Holcomb Boulevard, and I just had a chance to discuss a number of pressing issues of the day, kind of similar to some of the community groups I had spoken before. Second thing I want to discuss, take this opportunity to discuss in my commission report is kind of to close the loop on this whole South Fork question. And I want to share a thought that I've had, and that's this. Having experienced the past couple weeks with this question of this loan, I've come to the opinion that we should start perhaps considering whether the South Fork Water Board, IGA, should be amended, and whatever charter amendments would correspond to it, to make the South Fork Water Board the full city commissions of each of Westland City and Oregon City. And here's what my thoughts are, why I'm having these thoughts. Logistically, we have a 10-member Urban Renewal Commission, so I don't think that having a 10-member South Fork Water Board would be unmanageable. The problem that I'm having as a city commissioner of Oregon City is that I confront policy issues like this loan, and I have to make decisions where 3 of my colleagues are completely in the loop on everything, and 2 of us who are not on the South Fork Board are not in the loop on everything. I understand that Commissioner Neely actually sat in on an executive session meeting of South Fork. I've not done that. I don't know if it's something that we should or can do. I'd like to get a clarification about that, because I don't have the time, and in fact, over the past 2 weeks, Mr. Collins and I were kind of missing each other because we were both so busy, because I wanted to get some information on some of the litigation that's happening, which I think played a role in why we were making this loan. But he couldn't find the time, and I couldn't find the time, and it never happened. And he also did indicate as well that had he been able to find out the time, that some of the documents that were related to the litigation with CRW and with Water Watch might be privileged even to a sitting member of the Oregon City Commission, which is a co-owner of South Fork Water Board. I find that strange. I think it's kind of a surreal position to be in, to have 3/5 of this board tuned in and having 2/5 of this board tuned out. I've complained in the past that we don't get reports from the mayor, whom I think is the responsible party in this. I don't, as the leader of our delegation over there. So I'd like to launch that discussion, whether it waits till the election, so be it. But I would like, and I mentioned to Mr. Kvaisman, before the meeting, that I'd at least like to get a legal opinion from the city attorney's office on these questions. On whether a sitting member of the Oregon City Commission who is not a South Fork Water Board member can A, sit in on South Fork Water Board executive session meetings, B, participate in executive session discussions, and C, review materials from South Fork Legal Counsel or correspondences between South Fork Legal Counsel and other parties and our own city attorney. It's just to me an untenable situation to be elected by the people and to be on the commission that is co-owner of South Fork, and to not have access to all of the information that is relevant to the responsibility I have to fulfill as a sitting commissioner of the citizens of Oregon City.
Mr. Neely.
Well, first of all, I need to clarify something. Any citizen can attend the South Fork meeting.
Yes, they're all open.
The executive session, if there was an executive session held, I left the room when the executive session was held. The board invited me back into the executive session. Now, there was no attorney there, but to listen. I did not participate in any of the executive session discussion, and it was clear later on that I probably shouldn't be there, and I was asked to leave. I did not ask to be there. I left I was invited back, and there was something of an implication that I went into the executive session. That's the circumstances in which it occurred. The only reason I was there was to just attend the South Fork meeting, which you and I can do. I've got no problem with looking at what should constitute the South Fork board. That's not an issue. But the implication there, I think, really irritates me.
I can vouch for that. It was Mayor Westland that invited him back into the session there. And then she, not only after invited him in, said, well, he was sitting there and said, well, here, come sit up at the table and join the group. So, but anyway, we don't need to argue about that now. And I was going to say, for every board or every presentation, I could sit and listen to presentations of impact. I'm not up to speed the same way as Mayor Norris and, or Doug is that go to those meetings, and that's why we have representatives. We trust that they are up to speed to do it. But I personally can't go to every committee all the time, and that's why we break things out.
But I'd like to respond. I did not mean to cast any aspersions on Commissioner Neely, because my position is that the two of us, as the commission members who are not on the board, because of our responsibilities as commissioners, should be able to attend South Fork executive session meetings.
Oh, I don't know about executive.
That's exactly the question.
That's easy to find out. We don't need to discuss that.
Because I think we should be able to, and as far as the spectrum of what's permissible, obviously we can't vote, but to be able to sit in an executive session and ask questions or express opinions, I think is fair game.
My execution of that throughout my years of public service has been that any board can determine who sits in on an executive session with concurrence of the board. So now we'll get the real legal.
And I haven't looked at this issue directly. I would advise, as far as the privileged documents, that you probably can't. Ultimately, this is a call to be made by the South Fork Council, not city attorney. I can certainly give you my advice, but it's we are separate entities, and they do have separate legal counsel who would make that determination of who can or cannot sit in on executive session. My guess is we probably end up at the same result. I know who their legal counsel is, and generally, it's something that can be determined relatively quickly. So, if you'd like me to, I can get that back to you and get it to you next city commission meeting as far as who it is. So.
Okay.
If folks are okay with that?
With what?
With him doing that research.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Resolve the question. Okay. If there's any further business to come before us, if there is none, we are adjourned. Get it out.
I'm sorry.